like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Transportation and Economic Corridors for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2026. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. And Minister, please introduce the officials who are joining you at the table. My name is Garth Rosewell, MLA for Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright and Chair of this committee. We'll begin tomorrow.
Jackie Armstrong Hominick, MLA for Saskatchewan Bakerville, and good evening, everybody.
Danny Au, Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo.
Good evening, fine ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Bachenko, Drayton Valley, Devon constituency. Thank you.
Nolan Dick, MLA for Grand Prairie. Grand Tantra, MLA Tabor Warner.
Over here we have Tom Liu. He's my ADM of Construction and Maintenance Division. Right beside me is Dale Fung, the ADM of Financial Services Division. I'm Devin Dreeshen, the MLA for Innisfil Sylvan Lake and Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors. I have Bryce Stewart here to my right, who is the Deputy Minister of the department, and Paul Smith, the ADM for Capital Planning Grants and Engineering Services Division.
Good evening, Court Ellingson, MLA Calgary Foothills.
Evening, Lauren Dack, MLA for Edmonton McClung and Shadow Minister for Transportation and Economic Corridors.
Good evening, Parmeet Singh Boparai, MLA from Calgary Falcon Ridge.
Good evening, Joe Cece, MLA for Calgary Buffalo and Vice Chair.
Kathleen Ganley, MLA for Calgary Mountain View.
I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. Mr. Dack for Member Calhoun Stonehouse, Member Boparai for Miss Aljanade, and Member Cece for Miss Sweet as Deputy Chair. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of the meeting can be accessed by the Legislative Assembly website. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silence for the duration of the meeting. Okay, our members, the main estimates for the Ministry of Transportation and Economic Corridors shall be considered for 3 hours. Standing Order 59.01 sets out the process for consideration of the main estimates and legislative policy committees. Suborder 59.01 subsex 6 sets out the speaking rotation for this meeting. The speaking rotation chart is available on the committee's internal website, and hard copies have been provided to the ministry staff at the table. For each segment of the meeting, blocks of speaking time will be combined only if both the minister and the member speaking agree. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours in the main estimates schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Should members have any questions regarding speaking times or the rotation, please email or message the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, a 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose having a break? Okay, thank you. Ministry officials who are present may, at the discretion of the minister, address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to the microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes or other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery are not to approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the block of speaking time in the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written materials provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the assembly for the benefit of all members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both questions and answers without interruption during estimates debate. Debate flows through the chair at all times, including instances when speaking time is shared between a member and the minister. I would now invite the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors to begin with your opening remarks. You have 10 minutes.
Well, thank you very much and good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to present Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors 2025-26 estimates. I already introduced you to my officials, but I'd say she's my favorite ADM is behind me. Lynn Vardy, the ADM for Traffic and Safety Services Division. So Budget 25 is focused on meeting the challenges facing Alberta with targeted investments to support growth and prosperity. Transportation Economic Corridors plays a key role in contributing to Alberta's economic, social, and environmental viability by providing a safe and efficient transportation system. Our department's 3-year capital plan totals $8.5 billion. Of this, more than $4 billion over 3 years is invested in projects in rural Alberta, while $2.1 billion over 3 years is invested in projects in Calgary, and $2 billion over 3 years is allocated for projects in Edmonton. Our capital plan includes $2.6 billion over 3 years for capital investment for the planning, design, and construction of major provincial highway and bridge projects. Approximately 3/4 of this investment is for existing or planned economic corridors. Most highway improvements were identified by industry partners to improve the movement of goods and services. Major projects in the province include nearly $125 million over 3 years to improve safety, provide better access and egress, and reduce congestion, including the Highway 2 interchange at Cardiff Road, just north of Edmonton, Highway 58 base paving, Highway 686, and there are 2 projects on this highway. One involves base paving, and the other is for detailed design of the Highway 686 extension, which I just mentioned in QP today is over 200 kilometers long. We are continuing to invest in enhancing our economic corridors across the province, including $314 million over 3 years to complete projects such as the Highway 3 twinning between Taber and Burdett, Highway 11 twinning between Sylvan Lake and Rocky Mountain House, and we've also allocated $186 million over 3 years for more than 50 engineering projects to address future needs to enhance the province's economic corridors. Engineering and design will be completed on these projects, allowing the department to progress with construction immediately when the required funding is approved. In Calgary, we are investing in major improvements to Alberta's busiest road, the Deerfoot Trail. Budget 25 includes almost $485 million in funding for the project over the next 3 years. Deerfoot is expected to be completed in 2027, the south portion. And once completed, it is anticipated that drivers will save about 900,000 hours of drive time. Our total capital investment also includes $240 million over 3 years for water management and flood mitigation. This includes funding to support the completion of the Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir project this spring. As well, it includes funding over 2 years to start engineering and planning for regulatory approval on the next required flood mitigation, and that is the Bow River Reservoir project. In addition to capital investments in new infrastructure, we are continuing our work to preserve and extend the life of provincial roads and bridges. We are dedicating $45 million over 3 years to support the replacement of low volume and aging bridges in rural areas all across the province. Replacing these bridges will improve travel for Albertans and industry, helping to support economic development and also to create jobs. Budget 25 maintains $1.7 billion in capital maintenance and renewal, or CMR, funding over the next 3 years to rehabilitate key highways. Investing in pavement rehabilitation can extend the lifespan of a highway by about 20 years. For highway maintenance, Budget 25 includes $454 million in 25-26, and that is a $24 million increase compared to the previous budget. The $454 million is the highest annual maintenance budget compared to the last 5 years and is $94 million higher than average over those years. In addition to maintaining and improving our highway network, our department's mandate includes supporting municipalities by improving critical local infrastructure. The capital plan includes $3.9 billion over 3 years in capital grants to help municipalities build much-needed local roads, bridges, water and wastewater, and also transit infrastructure. We recognize that rural communities are vital to Alberta's success, and that's why Budget 25 includes targeted investments to support their growth and prosperity. Budget 25 also includes $650 million in capital grants to benefit rural communities across the province, including $126 million dedicated to the Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Program, or more lovingly known as STIP. We know funding through this program is critical to supporting municipalities. STIP funding STIP funding allows for smaller and rural municipalities to maintain and improve local road bridges, local resource roads, and community airports. We recognize the huge demand for water that comes with a growing population. Through Budget 25, $510 million in grants will support rural municipalities by funding new water and wastewater systems. In other grant funding, we are continuing to provide support for light rail transit, projects in both Edmonton and Calgary. Our total provincial commitment is $3 billion over multiple years, of which $1.53 billion is for the Calgary Green Line, LRT, and $1.47 billion is for the Edmonton LRT projects. Budget 25 also maintains our commitment to supporting Calgary's Blue Line LRT Northeast Extension project, with $13.9 million in funding being provided over 3 years. The Blue Line will extend by one station from Saddletown to 88th Avenue Northeast, which will allow the eventual connection to Calgary's International Airport. As well, $5 million in new funding in 25-26 will allow the City of Calgary to assess procurement options and planning work for a new transit solution that will connect the Calgary International Airport terminal with the Blue Line Extension station. This project will enable a future direct connection to downtown Calgary. And progress is continuing on the development of the passenger rail master plan. And Budget 25 includes $6 million in 25-26 to support this work. The plan will look forward decades, identify concrete actions that can be taken now, and future actions to build the optimal passenger rail system for the province. Our government is continuing to provide $173 million over 3 years to the City of Calgary for infrastructure to support the Calgary Rivers District and Event Centre to help revitalize Calgary's downtown. And we are continuing to provide $169 million in capital grant funding over 3 years in support of 3 critical local infrastructure capital projects in the Edmonton area: the Yellowhead Trail improvements, the Twilliger Drive expansion, and the Ray Gibbon Drive project. In other parts of Alberta, we are continuing our commitment to support the Red Deer Regional Airport expansion with $11 million in grant funding over the next 2 years. This investment will help the airport attract new passenger and cargo services. The commercial carrier industry is another important contributor to Alberta's economy, and that's why we are investing in new Class 1 commercial driver training, which will help attract and retain drivers to reduce the labor shortages in this industry. Budget 25 includes $25.6 million in 25-26 to support the Class 1 learning pathway for commercial drivers and to provide grant funding to support employers in the commercial driving industry. The Class 1 learning pathway, which officially launches April 1st of this year, will allow drivers to develop skills as a trainee and build on their skills and experience with the goal of seeking a Red Seal designation in the future. We are dedicating $10 million in grant funding to employers to support the training and direct employment of Class 1 drivers in the province. As well, we are allocating $13.1 million to support a industry advancement grant. This program will be aimed at supporting projects that contribute to increased employment, attraction, retention, and industry diversification within the commercial transportation industry. These investments will not only attract and retain drivers, but will also enhance safety within the commercial driving industry. We are also investing in improving transportation safety through a $13 million commitment over 3 years to support municipalities in implementing calming safety measures to improve local traffic. Municipalities can apply for funding to upgrade and enhance local roads and intersections that pose safety hazards. We're also investing in improvements to increase security at our border crossings. This budget has $15 million for new vehicle inspection stations and training for highway maintenance contractors to detect potential illegal activity. And this investment demonstrates how Budget 25 is meeting the challenge of uncertainty in trade and security by focusing on diplomacy and supporting the economy. Now, together, all of these investments in Budget 25 allow us to meet the challenge of a rapidly growing population.
Thank you very much, Minister. We will now begin the question and answer portion of the meeting. For the first 60 minutes, members of the official opposition and the minister may speak. Honorable members, you'll be able to see the timer for the speaking block both in the committee room and on Microsoft teens. So, Mr. Member Dak, would you like to share time with the minister?
Yes, indeed. By agreement, I believe the minister and I have agreed to go back and forth, and unless he's changed his mind, that's what we'll do.
I accept your terms.
Okay. Okay, a block of shared time is 20 minutes, during which you may go back and forth with a question, comments, or responses. However, neither participant can talk for more than 10 minutes in one stretch. So with that, we'll get going, carry on for 60 minutes.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and I do intend to have a back and forth in real time with the minister so we can have an adult conversation and try to get as much information to the Alberta public who may be watching today as possible. And I wanted to start off by saying that I appreciate the staff that are here and all the work they've done to prepare the minister, and we look forward to making best use of their time as well. So, Minister, to begin with, let's start off with some Green Line questions on this evening's meeting. So, in the recent past, Mayor Gondek has said, and was quoted as saying, "This is not about alignment; it's about risk and who's going to pay for it." And that's, I think, what Calgarians are really concerned about with the sort of on-again, off-again support for funding that your government has had with this Green Line project that keeps changing in its alignment. And now, of course, the whole thing may be up in the air because, as you indicated, it's up to the federal government to make a final decision on whether they're going to support this new alignment. So, isn't the real question that is being bandied about right now the effort on your part to try to dump the risk onto the city of Calgary for any shortfalls rather than assuming it yourself as a province?
Thank you for the line of question. And I think maybe just to not correct you, but just enlighten you or let you know kind of a more accurate set of facts when it comes to the Green Line. The $1.53 billion commitment that this government has is the same commitment that your NDP government had, which was the same commitment that the PC government had back in 2015 when Naheed Nenshi, when he was mayor of Calgary, had his vision, if you want to call it that, of building a 46-kilometer Green Line from Calgary's north to Calgary's south. And then got $3 billion in federal and provincial funding, and also committed $1.5 billion from the city of Calgary for a total of $4.5 billion Green Line project for 46 kilometers. Now, the issue with that is there was no proper engineering, study, planning, really anything to commit that type of funding for that type of project. And that's what's made the Green Line so difficult to deal with, and it's been multiple governments, been multiple mayors that have now had to try to deal with that reality. And the $1.53 billion commitment is still there, and the communications that we've had with this current council is we want to make sure that that funding is still there. And the province has already put in funding into the Green Line over the years. And I'm happy to say that in this budget actually has pay on progress. So rather than a $208 million just routine payment from the provincial government for the Green Line, we actually have pay on progress. So now any construction...
With respect, what I was hoping to get at was the potential shortfalls that they're estimated to be about $1.5 billion. And Mr. Chair, through you, I'm going to refer to this as estimates document, page 231, line item 5.5 with respect to Calgary LRT projects. I mean, that's what Calgarians are worried about is indeed, will they be saddled with the overruns, which could be multiple billions of dollars, and that's a question that you directly answer for Calgarians. Who's going to be responsible? Like, it seems like the province, through you, through the chair, minister, is not willing to undertake responsibility for the cost overruns that appear to be adding up over the billion, $2 billion, or multi-billion-dollar mark.
So as I was trying to say, and maybe correctly answer that more definitively, but when it comes to Edmonton and Calgary LRT projects, Edmonton and Calgary are, I think, and to use your terms, on the hook for any cost overruns for those projects. So the $1.47 billion that the province has in funding for the Edmonton area contracts or LRT projects. The 1.53 billion that is committed to the Green Line from the province, the City of Calgary is the same, is responsible for any cost overruns, and it's the same for when it comes to the Blue Line. That those are Edmonton and Calgary projects, and our involvement to make sure that we actually got more value for taxpayers' money is why we got involved this last summer. We actually stopped the over $1 billion of tunneling that would have just been, that actually shrunk the Green Line. It actually went even smaller from where it originally
That,
was.
Mr. We'll get back to the tunneling shortly. I wanted to drill down a little bit more through the chair on the recent reports about the cost overruns that are projected. Once again, referring to estimates document page 231, line 5.5, Calgary LRT projects. December 18th, Global News, that's 2024 article, City of Calgary claims the provincial government proposed alignment for the Green Line LRT will cost at least $1 billion more than the city's previous plan for the line. 1.3 billion in known costs and risk were not included in the work by AECOM, the third-party consultant hired to find a new downtown alignment. And this is the type of cost that Calgarians are really upset about when they're emailing me and saying, well, why in the world are we being saddled with them as a city? And you're saying that both Edmonton and Calgary are in the same boat. Why is the province not underwriting and being the one to backstop these projects when indeed that's not an unusual thing to happen in major infrastructure projects in other jurisdictions?
So again, all the LRT projects in the province are treated the same. So both Edmonton and Calgary, these are their projects. And when it comes to the AECOM study that you referenced, it actually found $1 billion in savings. So I'm not sure where you're getting your numbers on $1 billion more. I'll give you just an easy to understand example that when it comes to rail, passenger rail transit for LRT, it's about $1 billion a kilometer to go underground, to tunnel. It's about $300 million to go elevated, to have some elevated platform, and it's about $100 million a kilometer to go at grade. So
through the chair, may I stop you there? And because indeed we have a dispute with respect to facts or interpretation, because my understanding is the redacted AECOM report hides certain information, and the full story is not released. We were hoping that you'd release the full report. Some of it's redacted, as you say, to protect private business interests and so forth, competitive advantage. However, the AECOM redacted report, it's speculated, says that the actual cost of the tunneling portion in the original plan would be roughly equivalent to the elevated portion, and there's no real savings that are going to be garnered by using an elevated plan that you promoted versus the original tunneling one, which leaves the downtown free of elevated or at grade obstruction. So that, I guess, remains to be seen. But we released the full report, not the redacted portions that are business purpose hidden, but the report that tells the full story about the cost differential between the underground portion, the tunneling portion, and versus the elevated portion, because from what I've heard, it contradicts what you've been saying about the cost of the tunnel portion, and it really shows that there's no difference between the two, and there's no savings to be had. I mean, it's just therefore makes one wonder why indeed you would propose to go with an elevated plan.
First off, Chair, if I agreed to go back and forth. I didn't mean that would be just cutting me off when I answer. There have been lots of misleading questioning from the member, and I'm trying to correct them, but now I have a laundry list of corrections to actually put on the record of what actually happens versus misleading statements.
Okay, well, we'll for the purposes of this, we'll let you give them some extended time to make your point.
I appreciate that. And on the AECOM report, it actually found that the new proposed alignment that actually wasn't going to be tunneled but would be elevated, that obviously would stretch the Green Line farther down south to Shepherd, which it had been designed to do, but then was cut off last year when the City of Calgary in the summer approved their shortened or stub of a Green Line. project. That longer alignment, which the City of Calgary actually approved, actually has 60% more riders, 76% more length, 71% more stations, and will actually provide LRT service to the Beltline. And it was also something that the City of Calgary actually approved. So I would like to correct some of the misinformation that the members stated, that this is something that the City of Calgary hasn't wanted, because the City of Calgary actually approved this alignment, and to somehow say that this AECOM alignment, which again is an elevated downtown portion versus a wildly expensive tunneling downtown portion, is again misleading. So as I was trying to say before, it's typically $100 million for LRT at grade, 300 million above, and $1 billion to tunnel. So if anybody ever says that to go above ground is cheaper than tunneling, is misleading to say the best.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, we'll continue, if I may. I wanted to ask the Minister, Mr. Chair, about his July 2024 statement, and very clearly quoted statement, confirming that the provincial money was there, the $1.53 billion in provincial funding for the Green Line was there, and his quote, you said you could take it to the bank, and was very, very resolute about that. And everybody's pretty pleased to know that that money was there, and the project was gonna go forward. Yet, I think it's 34 days later, there's a complete reversal, and the ministers canceled the project. And we're still, as Albertans, scratching our heads and wonder what in the world, in 34 days, with the biggest infrastructure project in Alberta's history, happened, so that the minister would come to a complete 180 and yank provincial money, a junior funding partner's money, I might add, from the project and cancel the project. Like, what information would cause the minister to make that reversal on a dime like that? I'm curious to know what exactly caused the minister to make that reversal.
It was the revised business plan by the City of Calgary. Mm-hmm. They put out a business plan to show that instead of going down to Shepherd, they were going to shrink the Green Line to Linwood and Milliken, serving, again, 60% less riders. So the ridership of the Green Line went from 51,000 down to 32,000. And also the length of the entire project went from 17 down to 9.8. Stations went from 12 down to 7. And actually, with that reduction of scope of the Green Line, actually was at a higher cost. It was over $6.2 billion. So when you look at value for taxpayers' money, to have a much smaller Green Line project for more money was something that we knew we had to get engaged after we saw the business plan that came from the City of Calgary this summer. That's why we wanted to make sure that we could find an alternative option to stretch the project down to Shepherd, and the best way to save money was through the downtown alignment, that was tunneling, to then go above ground instead of below.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you once again. I beg to differ in some of the interpretations given by the minister now as far as the motivation behind the city's decision. And in many cases, it's been described as like a forced transaction on the city. The city is backed into a corner, because initially, of course, the Green Line years ago was to be two lines and north and south and joining in downtown. And it's morphed a few times into different project ideas, but the initial concept was to do the hard part first. And when then Mayor Nenshi managed to get $1.53 billion from the federal government, the idea was then to do the difficult part first, the expensive part first in downtown Calgary, do the tunneling, and then the less expensive stuff that could be done by more local companies would follow that. And, you know, of course, that's gone by the boards now, and now we may end up never seeing the downtown part done within our lifetime. So I was gonna ask the
Excuse me,
minister,
if we could just, like, you know, I'm all in favor of using past comments to build context towards a question relative to the budget. So if we could focus on that, that'd be great.
Getting to my question,
Okay,
Chair,
good.
thank
Thank
you
you.
for that. And so, I mean, all of this has led to what we've been talking about is cost overruns. So I'm just wondering why the minister suggests that it's the City of Calgary's responsibility, and why his government's desire is to saddle the Calgary taxpayers with potentially billions of dollars in liabilities that have been caused by this government's monkeying around with the alignment that has been studied exhaustively. So I just wanted to ask that one more time and see if I can get an answer that's more satisfactory.
You may not be satisfied with this answer, but it is factual. The city of Calgary is responsible. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the mayor of the city of Calgary that created the initial Green Line to be 46 kilometers to serve north and south Calgary was for $4.5 billion, and that was 10 years ago. And I know it's been called the Nenshi nightmare of nothing to be able to be built in that 10-year span, but I am happy to say that the construction of the Green Line should happen this year. That we saw that the city of Calgary, through Mayor Nenshi, when he initially got funding approval from the federal and provincial government to build a 46-kilometer Green Line, that he had no wherewithal to finally or actually do, is what created the entire mess with the Green Line. So I do actually feel sorry for the current Calgary City Council that had to inherit this mess and contract issues of buying rail cars that don't actually fit with their other alignments. There was a myriad of problems that that happened due to the city of Calgary when Mayor Nenshi was the mayor of Calgary, and that's what's caused a decade of confusion and frustration when it comes to the Green Line, which we don't see in other LRT projects across the province because they were designed and planned out properly at the beginning. And unfortunately, the Green Line didn't have that under Nenshi in 2015.
Thank you, Minister. And through you, Chair, my understanding is that the City of Calgary is the only municipal jurisdiction to undertake the liability, and of course now Edmonton too, in all of Canada. And the city is also on the hook for the cost overruns potentially at the arena. So be that as it may, I wanted to point that out and then ask my colleague, if I wouldn't mind, MLA Ganley, to come forward with a few questions of her own and then pass on to perhaps Mr. Singh.
Thank you very much. Pardon me. Thank you very much, Emily Doc. I really appreciate that. I also have a few questions about this particular project. So I think what I'd like to start by doing is just sort of establishing some pieces of this. So this is a project that is funded by the city, by the province, and by the federal government. And just so everyone's on the same page, I'm looking at Transportation Grants, line 5.5, page 231, which specifically deal with the green and blue lines in Calgary, and page 237, which is revenue from the federal government. So the new funding arrangement insisted upon by the province only builds the line from Shepherd to the predicted new arena, as far as we're aware. The minutes from Calgary City Council suggest that the city's report makes it clear that the section between the arena site and the proposed 7th Avenue will require a functional plan to report back in Q4 2026, then require an additional vote by council. In light of these changes to the arena, it seems like federal funding could potentially be at risk because of the change to decrease ridership. Which I understand the minister confirmed in the media on the 14th of March. So I'm just curious what the province's plan is in the instance that the federal government withdraws its funding because of this change in alignment.
We were going to do an announcement on this, but I guess we might as well do it here. It's as public as it gets. We actually don't have to worry about that because the federal government gave us their approval of the business case that the city of Calgary and the province worked on together and submitted to them just today.
Oh, well, that is good news. So we're expecting money to come through from the federal government, which is good, I think. I think my colleagues' concerns continue to resonate for me because the province is putting in money, the city is putting money, the federal government is putting money for the line that's being built. What I'm concerned about is the fate of sort of the sunk costs. So because previously decisions were made, decisions that apparently one could take to the bank and then could not, because those decisions had been made, you know, a bunch of property was expropriated. For instance, a mall has been torn down in Eau Claire, and a number of other costs have already been spent that can't be recovered. And the estimate on that is between 1.3 and 1.5 billion dollars, depending on who you ask. So I'm just a little curious, in light of the funding, like who's paying for those sunk costs?
So the $6.2 billion plan that the city of Calgary approved for the budget of the Green Line back in the summer, which then obviously got changed and the alignment went above ground instead of below ground and didn't stop at Linwood, Milliken. It stretched further down to Shepherd, and obviously the cost savings you get from not tunneling downtown allowed you to stretch the Green Line farther south. That budget is whole at $6.2 billion. So to be able to build kind of an apples to apple comparison of a Green Line that would connect into the red and blue line, a Green Line that would go to the event center, and a Green Line that would go to Shepherd were the three conditions that we always put on the city to make sure that the Green Line should go ahead in the most appropriate manner. So that apple-to-apple comparison is the best that we have. When it comes to city lands that are obviously their assets that they can now use for other city priorities, that's where we're still working with the city of Calgary to figure out what those lands that they have that can now be used for something else, and their assets are now being used for something else or could be used for something else, what that apples to orange comparison would look like.
Okay, I guess we're gonna have to disagree what the apples to apples comparison is, because those properties were already expropriated, and they were expropriated at a considerable amount of money. It's like riverfront property in downtown Calgary. It's worth a significant amount of money. And so I think that when we cost the overall project, the fact that we've already spent money on that is probably relevant. And as well, I actually think it's your side that's generally more fond of saying that there is only one taxpayer. I'm concerned for those costs regardless of whether they land on me as a provincial citizen or as a citizen of Calgary. So I guess, I mean, in my view, that is an increasing cost, but we can leave that there. I think one of the other concerns that's come up that's significant is, in addition to costs, on January 28th, the Calgary Downtown Association, Calgary Construction Association, the Commercial Real Estate Association, and others wrote to the minister detailing concerns with the elevated line, including multiple impacts to downtown. I'm not going to read them all because it's a really long list. But essentially impacts on retail space, impacts on people's businesses in the area, impacts on property values being one of the large ones. And so this is a concern for people in the surrounding area, and I'm wondering if there's a plan to address these concerns, and whether the minister is at all concerned about the fact that, having previously indicated that the alignment was something you could take to the bank, and having now changed, whether that's going to create a certain amount of uncertainty that can be harmful to business.
On the downtown alignment and the localized concerns is a very legitimate process, something that was done on the south part of the alignment, the middle part of the alignment. Whenever you have an LRT project going forward, you obviously have to engage and talk to the locals that are going to be impacted by a project. The downtown portion, just because this now elevated alignment is new, is engineered, they'd say it kind of like the 5%, which is just kind of the initial design work of a project like this. That's why your colleague mentioned in 2026 is when that detailed design functional planning that'll be commissioned by the city will finally get up to about a 60% engineered rate, which the event center down to Shepherd is already engineered at. And once you hit that 60% engineering threshold, that's when you can be confident putting out construction tenders to actually see things finally being built. And so that's why, as I previously said, from the Event Center South, construction will happen this year because they've hit that mark. But because of this new alignment, the work that AECOM did is at that 5%. It will take time to get up to that 60% engineering.
Okay, yeah, I mean, as a person who lives in Calgary, I will admit that I'm somewhat concerned that we don't know for certain that the train is gonna hook up to the red and blue lines, right? Because
It will at the 7th and 2nd. That's where it'll tie into the red and blue line.
no, I understand that, but my understanding is there's another vote of council required before the line can be fully extended, right? There's still work being done on those pieces. We don't have certainty around any of that.
The work that'll tie it into downtown is going to be that finalized, the issues that you raised of what's it going to actually look like, where exactly is the elevated line going to go, that how does the plus 15 network change, those types of engineering and functional planning, that will get more clear as more engineering and functional planning is done. But the determinus where it'll actually go at the red and blue line, that alignment has been developed.
So I guess my other question about that would be then, so initially this project was proposed in 2015 and a number of things have occurred now. It was essentially, to my understanding, kind of ready to go out the door in the kind of 2020, 2021 sort of era. And it was stalled by not yourself, but the then Minister of Transportation for basically 2 years. In that time, because we had been in a pandemic and we had come out of a pandemic, inflation was significant, right? I know you're saying, Minister, that, you know, the fact that the cost has gone up since 2015 was, well, whatever your explanation for it is, but I think the cost increase, the significant portion of that cost increase incurred between 2021 and now as a result of the delay. So I guess my question is, like, if we don't anticipate building that portion that goes from the Beltline into downtown, so we don't know that the train is going to get downtown, and you know the city's estimates would suggest like this is coming back Q4 2026, followed by validation, followed by a number of other things that suggest that there's a question, because then city council has to vote on it again, and we don't know. Well, I mean, it definitely won't be exactly the same city council at that time. What are we doing about costs increasing in that time?
So two things. One, the federal funding, the provincial funding, the business case that just got approved today has from downtown down to Shepherd. So I'd hate for you if I wasn't clear enough to say that the downtown portion is part of the Green Line business plan. It's at a different stage of engineering, but that entire downtown to Shepherd is part of the business plan and is part of the Green Line plan going forward. And going back to 2021, I think the years what you referenced, that had issues of, again, going underground, under the Bow River. And it was then decided by City Council to not tunnel underneath the Bow River and to back it up into downtown. So the Green Line, unfortunately, whenever it's designed to go downtown, whether it's downtown or underneath the Bow River, they've always saw the cost uncertainties with that. And that's where, again, the shrinking of the alignment through the Bow River was something that happened back then.
Thank you. So I would just say, I guess my question then is, can you reassure the people in Calgary, if you're saying that this is completely ready to go and that this amount of funding will take us all the way from 7th Avenue down to Shepherd, can you reassure the people of Calgary that they can take that to the bank? Is that a correct estimate? Like, how certain are you that there aren't going to be cost overruns?
Well, I'm certain that construction will finally start. And when it comes to any type of project, whether it's a road, a bridge, an LRT project, the best way to properly plan and to execute on a project like that is to do lots of engineering, lots of planning, and then once you're at that stage where you can actually start construction as quickly as possible. And so that's finally where we're at now with the Green Line, to be able to say that we have the engineering done. We can start putting the construction tenders out, and we will this year, the City of Calgary will this year. And we'll finally see construction on the Green Line happen. And I think that's the best way to stop any inflationary pressure on any project, is to just finally start and build. But don't just start and build like what happened in 2015, where you didn't actually have any planning done, which again had this 10 years of trying to plan, shrink, fit a budget into a project that was really unrealistic at the first place. It's almost a textbook of what not to do back in 2015, was to come up with a budget and then try to force a project into it. You have to be able to design, engineer, cost it out, and then go out to construction as soon as possible. And thankfully, we're finally at that stage with the Green Line after 10 years.
Yeah, I think my concern is, so you're saying, I appreciate what you're saying. I actually think you're correct that you don't really know. You can't say that it's committed, that you can't say that it's building until such time as, you know, you're able to start on it. I think my concern is that we aren't there on the portion of the train that would move from the Beltline to 7th Avenue, and that's I would say where the majority of people work, right? Like most people in Calgary tend to take transit to go downtown for work. And I think if we don't know that the train's gonna go there, I have some serious concerns about how utilized it will be in light of the costs, right? Like the original alignment and originally, you know, getting that into Eau Claire, I think was, yeah, it was important, and the fate of that Eau Claire piece is a big concern. So I guess my concern would be that we're not there on that piece yet, and my further concern would be, you know, when are we planning to go up to Eau Claire? Because my constituents, my riding, and a number of my colleagues are north of the downtown, right? And until we make that jump to Eau Claire, there's very, very little chance of getting across the river. So I'm just wondering, like, when are we expecting that piece?
Well, again, I would say that the 10 years of Green Line discussions that hasn't had any major construction after 10 years, I would say let's obviously finally build the Green Line, and obviously we'll go meet those 3 conditions that I mentioned earlier of tying into the red and blue line, going to the new event center, new Saddle Dome, and then stretching as far south as possible. And I think beyond that scope of, okay, you're at Shepherd, fantastic, what about going down to Seton near the hospital? I think would be a discussion for a future council and perhaps a future government, provincially, federally, to be able to make those decisions. And then obviously, what does it look like to go finally north of the river? That's, again, something that I mentioned earlier to your colleague. Unfortunately, it seemed that in 2017, there was the decision of, do you start north and go to downtown, or do you go south and go to downtown? And the decision at that time, back in 2017, was to cut off the north and not cut off the south. So there was that decision that was made back then, but that was a different government, different time, different mayor.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, at the time, they were still doing expropriation work around Center Street North, which is the busiest transit corridor in the city at this moment. So, I mean, that was 2017. I would say that work could easily have been completed at this point. So, I mean, I guess I would hope to see from this government a commitment that north leg is going to go at some point.
All I'll say is the 1.53 billion to build the Green Line is there, and I know I've said they can bank on it. Well, hopefully people will actually see the actual benefits of that and actually see construction start this year from that 1.53 billion. And as I said, we already have the Blue Line connector going into to the airport. There's engineering studies money in this budget that'll finally take the Blue Line across over to the Calgary Airport. There's also that 800-meter expansion of the Blue Line to add that extra station up to 88th Avenue. So there are LRT projects that I think are a little more advanced in design work that we want to make sure we have construction dollars for. But like I said, is the Green Line going to just end at the bookends of this current business plan Green Line right now? That's not how the red or the blue were always built, so I'd imagine that they'll always be able to have extensions onto any LRT project, but that, again, be a different council and a different provincial government in the future.
Thank you, and I'd like to cede the remainder of my time to my colleague, MLA Singh Boparai, I believe, has some questions.
Thank you, Member Ganley, and thank you everyone here. And Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister. I ask based on line item 11, provincial highway rehabilitation, specifically 11.1. Highway rehab projects, which includes highway pavement restoration, intersection improvements, and other safety-related activities. How does the Minister plan to address the critical issue of driver safety, particularly with regard to the lack of rest stops, along with the provincial highway network? And as you all might be aware that we are losing lots of young lives every year due to these lack of these safety measures. We know that Alberta's trucking industry is a lifeblood of our economy. These truck drivers are the backbone of the provincial supply chain, ensuring goods are delivered from one end to the province to the other, and they were lauded and essential workers during the pandemic for keeping our economy moving. But however, these same drivers face immense challenges when it comes to their own safety on the road. One of the most significant concerns which has not been adequately addressed is the severe lack of proper rest stops along our highways. Drivers spend long hours on the road, often away from their families for days at a time, and they face fatigue and health risks because there are not enough designated safe spaces to rest. Well, fatigue is, as we all know, is one of the leading causes of accidents on the roads, and without proper rest facilities, these drivers are left vulnerable to dangerous conditions that put their lives and the lives of others at risk. It's essential that the budget prioritize the inclusion of more rest stops and infrastructure improvements. Given the importance of trucking to the economic stability of Alberta and the role drivers play in keeping our province connected, how will the ministry ensure that these rest areas are included in highway rehab projects? And how will this be given greater priority? This is not just an infrastructure issue. It's a safety issue that directly affects the well-being of the workers who are responsible for moving goods across Alberta, keeping our economy running smoothly. Thank you.
Great question and great questions. I'd like to first start by saying on the highway maintenance, Budget 25 has a 5% increase in the highway maintenance to make our roads safer, smoother, all across the province. And just more on driver safety, we also launched the Slow Down, Move Over campaign of any highway maintenance worker, whether it's a tow truck driver working with a Class 1 driver, or towing them, or any roadside maintenance worker or officer to have to go 60 kilometers by that individual, or to vacate and move to a lane to the side. And I would say both those measures are, obviously keeping the roads in good shape, and then to have that public safety awareness campaign has gone a long way of improving awareness. But when it comes, you're absolutely right, when it comes to Class 1 drivers, they're the backbone of our economy. They move our goods and services all across the province, not just for exports, but also just everyday essential items. And I think I always, whenever I meet with the industry, I always thank them right off the bat, because what they do is such an important part of what makes our great quality of life that we have here in the province, and that we can go to a grocery store and it's always fully stocked with fresh items. So I mean, it's incredible the work that they do, and I would say whether it's the training grants that we provide for new drivers to be able to enter into getting a Class 1 driver's license is something that's in this budget. We've also worked on the Red Seal certification that we're trying to get other provinces to recognize truckers as a Red Seal program, which is, I mean, whether you're a chef or a hairdresser, you can get that red seal, but as a truck driver, you don't get that level of professional recognition. And I think that's something that I'm happy to work with other provinces to try to get that Alberta-led initiative across the line, just to give more proper recognition to our trucking industry. And when it comes to rest areas, Budget 25 does have $38 million over 3 years to expand the rest areas that we have. There was a previous request for proposal that went out for a rest area expansion across the entire province. That unfortunately was unsuccessful a few years ago. So we're currently looking at how not just expand the existing areas that we have now, but actually look on the map where you could have proper economic corridor reaches of safety areas, inclusion of services. So it's not just, a roadside pullout, but having other services for truck drivers as well. So I 100% agree with the sentiment of your question, and it is something that Budget 25 does have to improve the safety rest areas as well.
Thank you. And again, Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister, I ask that based on line item 3, traffic safety programs, specifically 3.1, traffic safety services, and 3.2, driver safety initiatives, which focuses on the development and delivery of transportation safety programs. How is the ministry using the budget to support vital industries such as driving schools and vehicle inspection services? These sectors are essential to ensuring driver safety, yet they're facing significant financial and regulatory challenges. As raised in the question 1 as well, improving infrastructure such as rest stops is crucial for driver safety. However, equally important is ensuring that the workers who are responsible for educating and certifying drivers, as well as those conducting vehicle inspections, are supported. These industries are encountering increasing difficulties due to discrepancies between practical experience and regulatory requirements. For example, driving schools and mechanics are being penalized for differences between real-world vehicle conditions and the technical compliance standards enforced by government manuals, resulting in unnecessary fines and burdens. How is the ministry addressing these issues to ensure that these essential industries are supported? Though programs are supports for these industries, how will they ensure that we are not placing additional burdens on the workers responsible for ensuring driver safety on Alberta's roads?
Again, great question. And Budget 25 through the learning pathways actually have 2 grant streams when it comes to driver safety, and that's the employer grant at $10 million that will have training for Class 1 drivers. And that's everyone from private businesses to nonprofit organizations, First Nations and Métis settlements, as well as the industry advancement grant that's at $13.1 million in this budget. That again will help to, not just Class 1, but also Class 3 drivers as well, to get that extra training to be able to get further additional training as well. So there is the 2 different grant streams that come from Transportation Economic Corridors for directly for driver safety.
Thank you, Minister. And again, we need to address those discrepancies as well. And based on line item 3, traffic safety programs, specifically 3.3 commercial driver grants, which provides funding support to Albertans entering the professional driving industry. How does the ministry plan to use the budget to address the rising financial barriers, particularly the increasing cost of insurance that new drivers face when entering the industry? Well, as I mentioned in question 2, the support for industries like driving schools and inspection services is essential to maintaining safety, but so is ensuring that new drivers can afford to enter the trucking profession. The escalating cost of insurance is a significant barrier to entry for new drivers, especially given that insurers require prior experience before they will provide coverage. But if they can't get a job, how will they get experience? This creates a vicious cycle. How can new drivers gain experience, as I said again? As Alberta's economy relies on the trucking industry to keep goods moving, it's crucial that the budget allocates resources to make insurance more accessible to new drivers. How will this ministry work with the Treasury Board and the Ministry of Finance to address the financial barriers posed by skyrocketing insurance premiums? And how will the budget help alleviate these challenges to ensure that new drivers can enter the workforce without being burdened by high costs?
You know, you're absolutely right. And something when we were working on the learning pathways for Class 1 licenses and the Red Seal certification program, we had the insurance industry at the table as well to walk them through what we were planning of to have this Red Seal certification for truck drivers and kind of this additional, the grant programs that we have for additional training, as well as just that certification of, you know, being able to differentiate between a type of driver and a type of training that they have. And the answer that we received from the insurance industry is that they're all data driven, so they want to see how successful this program is. So unfortunately, you know, time will tell of when we roll out these new grants, when we have the Red Seal certification program up and running. If we can demonstrate, work with the trucking industry to demonstrate that truckers in Alberta are now that much safer due to these efforts, I think that's something that will definitely be there with them, talking to the insurance industry to make sure that the insurance rates for them is reflective of the data that they're seeing of having safer drivers.
Thank you, Minister. Now I would like to pass on my time to Member Deck.
Thank you very much to both my colleagues for those receptive questions, and once again through the chair to the minister. I wanted to ask a couple of questions that are different topics. I wanted to turn to the estimates 7.4, page 230. Investing in Canada infrastructure, rural and northern communities. It provides funding to support projects that improve infrastructure in small, rural, and remote communities. It's a federal program with grant funding flowing through the department's budget, Mr. Chair. Now, this grant is no longer being offered by the federal government in the next 2 years, which is why we see the investment dollars are decreasing. So, to the minister, can the minister please list the projects that were covered under this grant and that are no longer being covered, and what plan does the minister have to replace these grants once they are discontinued in an effort to support rural Alberta?
No, for rural Alberta, as I mentioned before, the $8.5 billion in our capital plan, over $4 billion of that goes to rural, just over $2 billion goes to Calgary, $2 billion goes to Edmonton. So I think there's more Calgary people on your side of the table, so happy to know there's more for Calgary in the capital plan than Edmonton. But rural, obviously, because of the provincial highway network that we have, gets the vast majority, gets over $4 billion in infrastructure. And just with our provincial assets of road and bridges that we have throughout the province at 64,000 lane kilometers, we actually have $75 billion worth of total assets for all of that. So there's a tremendous amount of investments that need to go to maintain that. When it comes to that the federal program and the feds vacating that area, something that we looked at Northern Alberta investment at $1.25 billion is something that if it has to cushion that blow from the federal government vacating that space, at least we're still investing in Northern Alberta with numerous projects in the north. And you know, the $1.25 billion, I could say, if you'd like me to list them, is the Highway 6320 north of Fort McMurray at over $101 million. Highway 881 improvements at $141 million. La Crete Bridge at $87 million, I apologize. Highway 40 between Hinton and Grand Cache at $69 million, as well as $127 million in Highway 60. And I know there's some Grand Prairie folks in the room that might want to hear this one.
Thank you. If I may, through the chair, you've answered my question.
I apologize for being
too
thorough.
No, that you're not going to be providing funding to replace the federal government funding that is no longer being provided under the program that has been discontinued. So, wanted to move on, if I may, through the chair once again, to Outcome 1 Business Plan, page 171, and it says there, strategic economic corridor investments and innovation support Alberta's economic growth. Now, economic corridors, as you'll know, form a network of vital links to markets in and out of Alberta, ensuring efficient access for Albertans and businesses and supporting vital economic activity. And capital investment in highway initiatives and grant programs build critical infrastructures that support job creation and economic growth. So, item 1.3, collaborating with industry stakeholders and other governments and Indigenous communities to identify and advance nation-building infrastructure projects to increase market access for Alberta. This includes advancing economic corridor agreements with Western provinces and territories. And I'm hearing, Mr. Chair, from rural communities about how they're struggling to get access to market. Forestry and agriculture producers are not able to access rail cars, with many sitting in the rail yard. In the north, many communities are wanting to access rail from Grande Prairie. However, a bridge is still required to be fixed, to the point where many northern communities have come together to create a rail lobbying group. So to the minister's job is to get product to market on economic corridors. What is the minister doing in response to this lobbying effort to get bridges built to support rail access for these products?
No, I was listing off the 125 billion in north, and you had mentioned Grande Prairie, and I was so close to mentioning how there is engineering to expand Highway 40 near Grande Prairie, because again, that is such an impressive part of the province when you look at the oil and gas plays there and economic activity, as well as the people that live there, and being able to have to interact with large truck traffic in a way that's safe for communities as well as for the industry. And for economic corridor agreements, we actually signed a prairie memorandum of understanding with Saskatchewan, Manitoba, to be able to look at economic corridors and be able to advocate for projects on a united front to the federal government, as well as Alberta and the Northwest Territories have signed a similar agreement. We're currently working on kind of a Western Bloc economic corridor announcement with British Columbia, the 3 territories and the 3 prairie provinces. I call it the Magnificent Seven, but no one thinks that's a good name, but I do. So there's lots of work on the economic corridor file of trying to, essentially, Alberta, we're in the business of making friends. We don't have access to tidewater. We're landlocked just like Saskatchewan, so we have to be able to make these types of agreements, whether it's rail access, road, pipeline, utility lines. We have to make sure that an economic corridor doesn't prescribe what has to be in there, but it allows for multiple types of transportation, mobility, to be able to have that pre-approved swath of land, essentially, to be able to get our products to market. And that's something that we've been working with jurisdictions all around us to make sure that we can get Alberta's product to market. And I've really appreciated your preamble to your question of you seeing the importance of that as well.
Thank you, Minister. And through the chair, once again, and I want the Minister, Mr. Chair, to consider his answer very carefully. I want to ask the Minister, Mr. Chair, can the Minister confirm whether or not the Ministry has any contracts with Rubicon, Marshall Smith's lobbying firm?
No.
That's a definitive no? All right, that's one of the things I wanted to get on the record, so thank you for that, appreciate that. Let's move on to something that I've been commonly talking about in other previous estimates, and we've discussed before, and I keep coming back to it because it's so important. We talk about economic corridors, whether it be rail, air, whether it be pipelines or electrical transmission, but roads are always the poor cousin, and they just don't seem to really get moved out of the performance metrics that have been in place for a long time. And yes, I will say, even when we were in government, those performance metrics for roadway maintenance were in place, and we unfortunately weren't able to move the bar on that either. But it still remains something that needs to be addressed, I think, given the importance of the economic corridors that roadways are. And we have never gotten past, and I'm referring, Mr. Chair, to the business plan on page 174, never gotten past these sort of age-old acceptable level of performance metrics in terms of the condition of our roadways. And they are typically, year after year, in not the greatest of shape, and that seems to be acceptable to successive conservative governments as well. And what we have typically is that in 25, 26, the targets are still going to be in the neighborhood of 15% of the roadways in poor condition, and 27% of them in fair condition, and that number hasn't changed for a long time. That's 42% of our roadways we find to be in poor or fair condition, with only 58% being in good condition. And the minister stated just a few moments ago that maintaining our roadways increases the longevity of those roads, so that we don't end up having to completely rebuild them and redo the road beds. Yet it seems this number has been static, and I'm hoping, given how important that the minister knows that our roadways are, that I'm hoping that we can prioritize on a much more higher level the maintenance and rehabilitation of our roadways, so that the total life cycle cost of the highway is giving a better return on investment, and so that rural Alberta in particular, which is where a lot of these roads are located, don't have to suffer from terrible roadways. And in the past, Mr. Chair, I've had, groups come forward from Athabasca area talking about Highway 58. We're talking Lesser Slave Lake. The member for Lesser Slave Lake was mentioning in his comments about Highway 88 being in rough condition, and how women who might be 8 months pregnant would have difficulty getting to a hospital and those rough roads. The helipad is also not in working order. So I wonder if the minister will comment as to whether it's his intention to improve the targets for roadway conditions to a level that would seem to be in this decade, the 2024-25 decade, because it seems like something that's a low-hanging fruit. We got asphalt, we've got aggregate, we've got labor. Let's put it to work and improve the economic corridors, our basic roadways. And Albertans wonder why you're not doing that.
There's a lot in that question. First off, and not to be partisan, but I would say our highway maintenance budget is actually 26% higher than when your party was in power. So we had 4 years of not having even close to the highway maintenance funding that we do have now. And as you mentioned, I had said that proper maintenance of road does maintain your roads with a 20-year longer lifespan, which is very important. So when you have 4 years of underfunding for highway maintenance from the previous government, that obviously sets the province back. And also we have some positive challenges as well that we had to deal with 500,000 new people moving into the province of Alberta in 3 years. That's like 5 new City of Red Deers that came in 3 years. So obviously that's more people on our roads, and the roads obviously deteriorate faster with more vehicles and more people on them. And also expanding our 64,000 lane kilometers. We have more roads that we have to maintain as well. So to get better performance metrics on it, it's kind of like kicking a longer field goal that happens year after year. It does become that much more challenging, but that's why you are seeing an improvement and an increase in the highway maintenance in this budget of again, 5% just from last year. And also you had mentioned Highway 88. There is $33 million in Highway 88 that'll go towards Highway 88 in this budget. It's broken up into 3 projects. There's one by the town of Slave Lake that needs some CN rail crossing. There's the middle chunk, which will see some utility work happen this year on it to widen Highway 88. And then finally, the final northern chunk of that 30-plus kilometer project is all in the budget, and work will begin this year. And then you also mentioned Highway 58. There's also $15 million in this budget in 3 years to expand that really important northern highway. So just to put into context of the 2 highways that you had mentioned.
Thank you for that answer, Minister. And through the chair once again, I mean, the Minister did mention in his remarks that it's a 25% increase over 6 years, so roughly 4% a year. It's not really a remarkable amount of money in terms of increase. And of course, not to be partisan myself, Mr. Chair, but this is not really addressing what we are getting at as far as MLAs who are hearing complaints from our constituents from all over Alberta, because this is something they see every day. They drive in the roads, whether it's the QE2 going to Edmonton, Calgary, or it's Highway 58 or 88 or 63. Everybody recognizes that we are are deficient in our highway maintenance. They can see that. You don't have to be an engineer to know that. And I don't know if the minister's answer is satisfying Albertans who say, look, we want to be able to boast about Alberta, but we don't go ahead and tell our neighbors in Saskatchewan or BC anymore, look, move to Alberta because 42% of our roads are in terrible condition. That's not something that we should be proud of, and I think it's something that should be rectified, and I'd really like to see the minister take the opportunity to say, look, I have been talking to my cabinet colleagues about this, and we really want to address it and make it part of our priorities to have our roadways in nothing less than good condition, if not excellent condition, on an ongoing basis, so that we can say, look, our highways are in great shape. And you won't have to complain about the school bus getting its headlights rattled out of its chassis because the roads are too rough. So that's I'd like to see him consider, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the first portion of questions for the official opposition. We'll now move to the 20 minutes for the government caucus members and the minister. Member Armstrong Humanick, would you like to share time?
Sure, whatever the minister would
Is that
like.
okay?
If you're happy, I'm happy.
Okay, so
okay.
it's, we'll go with 20 minutes, and just so everyone knows, at the end of this 20 minutes, we'll take our 5-minute break. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, through you and to the minister. First, Minister, I want to thank you and your ministry staff for all of your hard work that you do, especially on the Green Line. I know the Green Line is important to you, and more importantly, the Green Line is the top of the list of Calgarians and many Albertans. I'll be asking you questions about the Green Line in a bit, but first I want to talk to you and ask you a few questions about my favorite topic, photo radar. On page 172 of the Ministry Business Plan under Key Objective 2.4, I can see the ministry is working with law enforcement and municipalities to ensure automated traffic enforcement, also known as photo radar, is only focused on traffic safety, not on revenue generation. I applaud you, Minister, and your ministry for your work on this item as a frequent highway driver myself. Minister, through the chair, can you give us some idea what this work with law enforcement and municipalities looks like overall? And can you please explain why it is so important to prioritize driver safety over punitive revenue generation going on into the 2025-26 reporting period?
Great question, and a lot of work has been done by my department when it comes to photo radar and engagement with the 25 municipalities across the province that use photo radar. Last summer, they did an engagement tour with the different regions that use photo radar and the law enforcement's kind of regional Edmonton, Calgary, central, north, as well as south areas that use it. And it was kind of an education process of how each municipality uses photo radar differently, who does it best, who does it worst. But we wanted to articulate that going forward, we wanted to instill confidence in the use of photo radar so that if an Albertan may get a photo radar ticket, they know that it was there for traffic safety and not for revenue generation. And that's where we came up with the criteria for any photo radar location in Alberta to be in school, construction, or playground zones. And we are allowing for an exemption to be filed by a municipality if there's an exceptional circumstance in an area that has a high frequency of collisions, something that they can apply to the province to get that exceptional basis. And to add to an additional location. But I think I think Albertans know that if you're ripping through a playground zone and there's a photo radar camera there and you get a ticket, that you should really know where that school zone is and a playground zone, and you're not speeding through it. So I think the focus on traffic safety is something that I hope will instill confidence. And I know lots have said that photo radar, whether it's in a transition zone or at the bottom of a hill, how visible they are. Lots of folks felt that photo radar was a cash cow or a fishing hole, and we even and I wouldn't even say it's a partisan issue. I think you see it was the previous or the NDP transportation minister that even called it a cash cow and something that they were looking at changing, and the NDP's previous leader was quoted as saying they wanted to reduce the use of photo radar. So I think we've came up with a very logical and practical solution for photo radar. The new rules will come into effect on April 1st. And that's something that, working with the law enforcement and municipalities and the department to roll out the new photo radar guidelines, I think will go a long way of instilling confidence in Albertans on the use of photo radar.
Well, thank you, Minister. And Chair, through you to the Minister. On page 171 of the Transportation and Economic Corridors Business Plan under Key Objective 1.6, I can see that the Ministry is implementing changes to Class 1 driver training in the 2025-2026 reporting period. These changes will focus on developing driver competency throughout their career while ensuring overall road safety. To the Minister, through your Chair, could you please explain to this committee why these changes were so necessary going into the 2025-2026 reporting period? And also, could you go into more detail as to what commercial drivers across Alberta can expect going into the 2025-26 reporting period?
Great question. And as I mentioned earlier, Class 1 drivers, our trucking industry is so important of moving our everyday goods as well as important commodities across the province. And when we have our Red Seal certification program that we actually need to have 5 provinces in total to sign off on that. Something at our federal, provincial, territorial meetings that I go to, I try to recruit other provinces to be able to follow Alberta's lead, to be able to get that Red Seal certification done at a national level. And I think once we achieve that, you'll see a lot of improvements for the trucking industry of recognizing those credentials and specialized training that truckers have to be able to presumably charge more, because they obviously are that much more of a professional driver and they have the credentials to show it. So I think the Red Seal certification is something that the industry supports, and I think will go a long way of recognizing the important work that our truckers do, and also rewarding the good truckers that we have all across the province.
Thank you, Minister. And Chair, again, through you to the Minister, on page 171 of the Ministry Business Plan, Key Objective 1.7 speaks to the facilitation of research and development into transportation and the piloting of innovative approaches and new technologies such as hydrogen vehicles and e-mobility in order to attract investment and to build a safer, more efficient transportation network overall. Going into 2025-2026, it is so important for the Ministry to focus on innovation as transportation technology is ever evolving. And Minister, through the Chair, could you please share with us some transportation technologies that the Ministry is interested in engaging with going into 2025-26 reporting period? And also, Minister, through the Chair, could you please explain to this committee how investing in research and development of transportation technologies will go on to support Albertans all across the province going into 2025-2026?
Again, great question, and it's really, from my position, it's really interesting to see different technologies and different companies come into Alberta to talk about their new novel concept that obviously maybe isn't approved yet, but they obviously, because no one's made the business case for it. So being able to review those technologies, whether it's hydrogen or personalized mobility devices, it's incredible to see what's out there. There's obviously other jurisdictions that have approved a lot of these technologies, and they're still kind of learning what comes of them. But it is something that we don't go out and seek it. Lots of companies come to us, and I just credit the team that we have within the department to be able to review and make sure that if we are to accept any new technology, that it's something that will keep Albertans safe, and to make sure that it maintains our transportation network that we have, but always looking to the future to see if there's better and brighter technology out there.
Thank you, Minister. And Chair, through you again to the Minister. On page 171 of the business plan, under initiatives supporting key objectives, I can see that $1.8 million on average will be allocated each year for development and maintenance of a high-load corridor across Alberta. The high-load corridor consists of designated highways, which have had their utility lines raised to accommodate loads up to 9 meters high. This corridor is incredibly important as it connects many of our resource-rich communities across the province. Minister, to you through the chair, can you please explain to this committee the importance of the high-load corridor and why it is so necessary to support this corridor going into 2025-26? And also, Minister, through the chair, I see the funding will also go towards development of the high-load corridor. Minister, can you please explain what developments we can expect from this corridor going forward?
No, again, great question. And we do have big stuff here in Alberta. And to have the high-load corridor to be able to transport, whether it's large oil and gas equipment or other industries that have some pretty impressive machines, it's great to see the high-load corridor investments because it really does help the economic growth and jobs and allow for businesses to want to set up shop here and invest here because they know that there's a transportation network that accommodates the requirements that they need. And the high-load corridor was created a long time ago, but it is something that it's great to see the constant improvements and investments in that network to be able to accommodate not just what we have, but also future growth.
Thank you. And Chair, through you, again to you, Minister. On page 227 of the government estimates, looking at the item labeled capital investment, I can see that overall the budget for capital investments will be increasing by $210 million when compared to the 2024-2025 budget. I know the ministry has made capital investments a priority for this budget as we invest our infrastructure across the province. To you, Minister, through the chair, could you please explain to the committee how the $210 million increase was decided upon going into the 2025-2026 reporting period?
It's always tricky going to Treasury Board. The capital investments and essentially every aspect of our budget, there's always a huge demand for increased funding. And when you look at population growth and expansion, that obviously stresses our capital network as well, or our road infrastructure network. So the increase that we saw is needed, and we're going to do the best we can to make sure that we prioritize the projects that need it the most to be able to ensure that we're prioritizing the right ones that need the investment this year, and then obviously staging things out over the 3-year capital plan. But it's the $8.5 billion total capital plan that we have is going to go a long way to improve the infrastructure that I have in the province.
Thank you, Minister and Chair. If you could please allow me to cede my time to my colleague, MLA Bochenko here.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, all your team. You guys are doing a great job. And it's actually impressive to hear all the projects that are coming in Alberta. And in your opening remarks, you have shared a lot of good information that Alberta is seeing and that will see in the future. So it's amazing to see how much is happening in our province, especially the big increase we have since the previous government. And I would like to say that without roads, without bridges, without airports and infrastructure, Alberta would just simply come to halt. So we truly appreciate the amount of work you do. And what actually impressed me the most was your knowledge on the Green Line. That was, how much you know about it. And I know you don't live in Calgary, but yet you invested so much into it. And although it's been in talks for about last 10 years, nothing have been done since you took it over. A lot's getting done, so thank you. Green Line is very important for Calgary, and you have shared that you have done a lot of investments in Calgary, and it's exciting to hear, especially on the Green Line, that's finally going to get done. However, my questions today will be on Edmonton and Edmonton region and the work you're planning to do and investments you're planning to invest into infrastructure, roads and bridges around Edmonton. So most of my questions will be around Edmonton region here, since you know we live here and my constituents are next to it. I want to take your attention to your ministry's business plan on outcome 1.1 on page 171, where we can see a significant investment in the central region included in your budget 2025. So my question will be to the minister through the chair. Can you tell us which transportation infrastructure projects in the Edmonton area are receiving capital grants, and how much are they receiving? Because I know you've talked a lot about Calgary, and we love Calgary, but we just want to know how much is getting inputted into Edmonton region.
I appreciate that, and I was surprised from the opposition how few Edmonton questions there were. But Edmonton is getting a lot in transportation and economic corridors budget. There's actually 1.8 billion over 3 years in capital grants to Edmonton and the capital region, of which 728 million are just in this upcoming year, and that's going to be for the Edmonton LRT project. The provincial funding for that is 726 million and 866 million in federal funding. And the Terwillegar expansion is here in Edmonton is also receiving 31 million over 3 years, so 10 million in 25-26. We're also investing in the Yellowhead on the north part of Edmonton. It's getting 106 million over 2 years. There's the Ray Gibbon Drive upgrade that's getting almost $32 million over 3 years. And also the Capital Region Wastewater Treatment Center is getting 10 million in 25-26. It's building off of previous, I think it was 40 million that went last year to it. So there's tremendous amount of investments in Edmonton and the Edmonton Capital Region that Transportation Economic Corridor has. And when I made the capital announcement down in Calgary, I was standing by some Calgary councillors, so it was tough to say that Calgary's getting a total of 2.1 billion. Edmonton's only getting 2. Calgary's beating out Edmonton because I am an Oilers fan, and it's always hard to see the two regions compete. But Calgary they scored better on this capital plan.
All right. Well, thank you. It's nice to hear that it's not only Calgary region, but Edmonton region has been really thoroughly looked at by your ministry and your amazing team. So more question again on Edmonton region. In your ministry business plan, outcome 1.1 on page 171 again, ministry notes that improvements will be made in the greater Edmonton area. So my question would be, when you're talking about greater Edmonton area, how far west and east and, from the area, the improvements, that you'll be talking about include? And then through the chair, would like to ask a question to you, Minister. Can the Minister tell us how much is included in the budget 2025 for capital investment into major construction projects in the Edmonton area? And second question to follow up on that would be, what projects are included in the budget 2025 for the Edmonton area? So if we can, maybe address those two questions, please.
Sure. I would say that just south of Edmonton at Leduc, at their 65th Avenue interchange, there's $40 million going into the completion of that project. In the Edmonton Capital Region, there's Highway 60 that's getting $127 million over 3 years. There's Highway 16A and Range Road 20 that is getting $20 million over 2 years. That's $11 million for this year, 25-26. And Highway 19 East and West and middle sections are receiving $17 million over 3 years, $9 million in 25-26. So there's lots, not just in the city of Edmonton, but the surrounding region of Edmonton, of really important capital projects that have been prioritized by municipalities, but I'd say also the Edmonton area MLAs that do raise a lot of these important construction projects to us.
No, and one thing that I love about our government, that when you raise the issues, you know, they get addressed, including the green line, obviously, in Calgary. It was a line item for 10 years, but under your ministry got done. So big thank you to you for that. And it's nice to work with the minister who actually gets out there and with the team gets the projects done. More questions on Edmonton area again, and as probably expected. Line item 10 now on page 232 of the government estimates shows the Ministry of Transportation and Economic Corridors is investing $125 million into the bridge construction projects over the next reporting period. And I know that the member opposite has raised the questions and concerns about the bridges generally in Alberta. But my particular questions would be to through the chair to the minister. If you can please tell us how much this ministry is investing in total in the Edmonton region under this line item. And then a second question would be to the minister again, what will these investments mean for those who live and work in the capital region? Like myself, I don't live in Edmonton, but I work in the capital region. And you know, it's important to understand, you know, how much total is invested.
Just to clarify, that was for the bridge funding just in the Edmonton region?
Thank you very much. That concludes the government members' first block of questions. We'll now move to our 5-minute break. So that means we'll come back here at 8:41. So 5 minutes. 5 minutes goes by in a hurry. Okay, now we move to the second round of questions and responses. Speaker rotation going forward will be the same as in the first round, starting with official opposition, followed by members of the government caucus. However, speaking times are now reduced to 5 minutes for the duration of the meeting. We will begin with rotation with the members of official opposition. We'll have the 5 minutes for questions and comments, followed by a response from the minister, who may speak up to 5 minutes. If both individuals have had an opportunity to speak once, we'll then move to the next caucus. What I'm going to do for the purpose of this, unless I hear differently, is we continue to share time. So if at any time you'd rather go to block, just tell me, and that way we don't have to ask that question every time. So given that we're assuming shared time, if the member and a minister agree to share time, we will proceed with a 10-minute segment during which neither the member nor the minister may speak for more than 5 minutes at a time. Members are reminded that they may not cede any unused portion of their time to another member. So please remember, discussion flows through the chair at all times, and regardless of whether or not the speaking time is combined. Who's speaking? Member Doc, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and no worries about ceding time. I've got a gazillion questions. Hopefully we can get through a number of them, because I think Albertans would be interested in hearing the answers. I wanted to do a final follow-up, Mr. Chair, on the issue of 42% of Alberta's highways being in poor condition, or very poor condition historically, because I don't think I heard a definitive answer from the minister as to whether it was his goal or desire to actually get to a point where all of Alberta's highways are targeted to be in good condition. And I wonder specifically to ask the minister if indeed his department has been directed to take a look at how much it would cost over, say, a 5-year period if those targets were aimed at getting all of Alberta's highways into good condition within 5 years. What would be the cost estimate of that?
So if they were to all be at the highest standard, I'm not sure if there's a jurisdiction in the world that has that into 100% good. But it is something that I've never seen the numbers crunched if they have done that. But as I said before, we have a 5% increase in the funding, and when you look at the additional population growth, the additional highway length, the additional projects, new bridges that we're building, obviously to keep pace with the growth of our population is something that we have to constantly see that increase. So like I said before, it's kind of like kicking a field goal, but it gets longer every year. So to stay ahead of that would obviously be something that, again, I've never seen a jurisdiction that's been able to forecast out that far.
Well, we do pride ourselves in being leaders in that type of goal, and being leaders in infrastructure standards. So let's hope that the ministry at least attempts to project what that cost might be to gain priority and superiority in our highway maintenance over the years, Mr. Chair, to make sure all of our highways are in good condition and keep them that way. In that vein, Mr. Chair, I wanted to ask a little bit about highway input costs and maintenance costs, because of course the main components are asphalt, or aggregate, and the crude. There's roadbed components and concrete, and of course steel as well involved in bridges in construction. And not all of that is affected by the tariff situation that we're involved in. But of course, given that some of those, particularly steel, has been tariffed by the U.S., and there's the reciprocating tariff by Canada on steel, wondering if the ministry can provide us with any estimates as to the increased cost to the provincial construction program projects that are slated to be underway in this upcoming construction year as a result of inputs that are now subject to tariff, such as steel and perhaps others that I may not be aware of or thinking about that are imported, Mr. Chair.
Great question, and something when it comes to U.S. tariffs, current ones or future ones. We have been reaching out to the construction industry and talking with them, obviously to get a good understanding of what any tariffs could mean to the industry. As you mentioned in your question, asphalt and a lot of local products with local construction companies is something that, when it comes to roads, is less of an issue when it comes to cost increases. But when you look at whether it's equipment coming in from the U.S. or other items that would obviously be affected by tariffs, that does have obviously an inflationary effect on them. So it is something that we're working with the construction industry of our projects, of how there's a possibility of a risk sharing of that increased construction cost going forward. But that's, again, something that we'll see what happens on April 2nd. And but just that constant engagement with the construction industry is something that we think is prudent to make sure that we can, again, put Alberta first and make sure that we have the best projects going forward that can actually be done on time and on budget.
Thank you for that, Minister, and through the chair, once again, a follow-up to that. Wondering, of course, there are escalating costs anticipated with many infrastructure projects. Roadways, of course, and bridges are included in that. The Minister has just indicated, Mr. Chair, that they're trying to tabulate what the tariff premium might be to those escalating costs. But if indeed it's something that's normally anticipated, what type of arrangement is there historically with the industry participants to deal with escalating costs? Is there a standard procedure built into most contracts, or is it just done on an ad hoc basis? I can't imagine it's ad hoc.
So again, as I said, bridges, steel, obviously with the tariffs, is something that we anticipate would be the most affected. But again, we'll see what plays out when it comes to April 2nd and whatever new additional tariffs we'll have. But I think it is just something, again, making sure that we're engaged with the industry is something that's important when it comes to any possibility of risk of premium risk sharing going forward on these projects, because again, obviously as a province, we own these projects and these assets, and we want to make sure that they can be built and maintained on budget. So that's something that we're obviously cognizant of. But inflation is built into our highway maintenance contracts already. So whatever the cause of the inflation, whether it be tariffs or just regular inflation, say carbon tax, for example, those types of costs, even though they'd be hidden, are actually, whether the inflation is, if inflation does obviously happen, that in the highway maintenance contracts does allow for that increase to go towards the company.
Thank you, Minister, and through the chair, once again, I don't know if one could actually call the tariffs inflation. They are inflationary, but in fact are the actions of the government imposing, the U.S. government in this case, led by the President Trump, imposing unfair, unjustified tariffs on Canadian steel and other inputs, aluminum, on our Canadian products, which are really a very significant threat to our Canadian and Albertan economy. So I'm wondering, in the light of the serious economic threat that these tariffs are imposing upon all Canadians, including us in Alberta, and the Alberta government is, of course, buying things that are subject to tariff as well. Is the minister still as happy to wear his red MAGA hat at public events as he was in the past?
As an Alberta cabinet minister, and having that my family's been in Alberta since before Alberta was a province, and part of a government that puts Alberta first, I'll always continue to put Alberta first. But on your question on inflation, COVID was another example of increased costs that wasn't straight up inflation, but was inflationary, that again would have highway maintenance contracts had that provision where government would share that upside increase to those contracts. So it's something that it is built, yes, for example, be built into contracts. That does happen currently.
All right, thank you, Minister, and through the chair once again. Let's move on to another topic, Minister, and through you, Chair, that I've talked about before in the past, and I wanted to really identify whether or not the ministry has changed its tune on this topic or not, and is willing to consider looking at investing in our economic corridor's safety, and that is by, we say in Alberta, we're a rat-free province. Why can we not look towards or aiming at making our roads ice-free? And I asked the minister before about anti-icing agents, and I'm wondering if indeed the minister has commissioned any studies of late to determine the effectiveness of anti-icing agents given their use on Alberta highways now, and also in northern United States highways to prevent icing from happening. We've all experienced winter storms, and recently they've happened. The QE2 was in really rough shape very, very recently. And other members seem to be taking this somewhat lightly, but it is in fact a technology that exists very much in Alberta right now. It's in use on our roadways. Duke County, for one. The city of Edmonton used to use it. It's on Deerfoot as well as on the ring road in Edmonton as well already. And as I mentioned, many U.S. states also have it. So through the minister, through the chair, given that.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the government side, and Member Dick, go ahead.
Excellent. Well, thank you so very much, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for keeping us entertained this evening on this fine Monday night. I got a couple questions just on airports. We're going to stick to airport and airplanes and stuff like that. So budget 2024, a little bit of history. You guys, or our government announced 1.1 million in grant funding really to bolster the development of 10 different regional airports across Alberta, including in my constituency of Grand Prairie, and then also in my compadres constituency of Fort McMurray as well. And so I've seen that the ministry has been hard at work at this. So thank you for connecting those. So where my question is, can you give us an update on these regional airports going to 2025? I didn't see any budget item for that in the budget, but I do see it prior. So I'm just kind of curious where we're at, and can you give an update on budget 2025-26, where we're going with this?
Great question. And our regional and municipal airports in the province, obviously, you come from northern Alberta, and you know the importance of our airports. And again, as mentioned earlier, we don't have water ports, but we do have airports. And to be able to grow and expand, not just for passenger use of airports and airlines, but also for cargo, is something that's very important for our economy, and also just for high quality of life for Albertans. And you are right that there was 1.13 million for 10 regional airports in last budget. And we're currently analyzing the studies that those 10 airports did to try to grow and expand in their own unique way, because obviously all those 10 regional airports are vastly different. Peace is obviously different than Fort Mac and Grand Prairie. So it is something that we want to be able to see what makes each airport unique, and then how can we fund them and or help support them. I know up in Fort McMurray, their airport, they didn't require any funding. They required just opportunity. There's some provincial land beside the airport that they were hoping to be able to develop and be able to bring in more businesses and revenue for the airport to increase its viability. So that's something that we're currently looking at as well, and it was identified in that study. So I just say we continue to work with these airports and our wonderful rural colleagues to make sure that we can advocate for them to try to grow and expand our airports, because they're important to not just our quality of life, but also to the economy.
Excellent. Thanks for that answer. So just to expand upon that, there has been a decline in intra-provincial air access across provinces. And air access, as you mentioned, is vital for my community. It's vital for any northern community, many rural communities as well. Pick a mid-sized city, and it's important, many communities. So how does Budget 2025 just address this issue of that interconnectedness and the need for that? Can you just expand on that a little bit too as well?
Sure. When you look at something that's in my mandate letter as well, from the Premier, is to look at increasing the passengers by air and to look at certain jurisdictions across the province of how we could accomplish that. So we're actually working with Myron Keene from the Edmonton International Airport and others in our Strategic Aviation Council to find ways that we could try to incentivize certain airlines to be able to serve certain markets. And when we look at whether it's Saskatchewan, Norway, other jurisdictions that really use their regional airlines and how government can get involved, those are the options that we're looking at. Saskatchewan has an example where the province funds a base amount of a certain number of seats for a route. And then if there's more people that use it, then the subsidy doesn't kick in. And if not enough people use it, then the subsidy does kick in. And they found that after that was up and running, that the subsidy was never ever triggered. So those are some things that we're looking at. There's a Norway example as well that we're looking at different ways of see what exactly would uniquely work here in Alberta to be able to increase passenger routes, and again finding the right airline willing to do that, because a large 737 with 200 plus people is probably not going to be serving our smaller rural regions, but finding the right airline with the right aircraft to be able to serve these communities is something that we're currently developing.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Minister. I do want to ask about Highway 40X bypass. It would be a miss on my part if I didn't ask. Absolutely. So I noticed that there's just on the overall budget on page 232, under line item 9, you can see there's overall $826 million allocated to highway construction projects across the province. Sizable budget, which is excellent. And with an increase from the previous reporting period. But what I did notice is that the Highway 40X connector bypass, which is planned to connect Highway 40 with Highway 43, was not a line item on here. So, can you just explain what funding, if any, is going towards this bypass going into the 2025-2026 reporting period?
So the Highway 40X within the 25-26 estimate is about $2 million going into that, and I know that the recently constructed Highway 43 bypass, this obviously would connect the 40X to 240, and I know that region is obviously expanding and growing, and you've seen and you understand that better than anyone, and to be able to have this expansion of this project I think is going to go a long way of not just helping out the oil and gas industry and the forestry industry in that area, but also to make sure people can get home safely as well. So it is a priority for this government, and we want to make sure that we can get it developed and built out as soon as possible.
Excellent. Well, I love hearing that it's a priority for our government, so thank you, Minister. Do you have any update on Highway 40X that you can give us in the committee here tonight?
Well, I know with 40, with 40X, with 43, that they all connect into each other, and we're currently on a lot of the engineering side to be able to put out a construction tender as soon as possible. Obviously, we have to buy land to be able to have that expansion. So we're getting close with landowners in the area to make sure that we can acquire that land to be able to grow and expand it. So that always takes time, and it should take time to make sure that we get it right, and landowners' property rights are respected. So that, again, it's something that I credit our northern regional office to be able to work with landowners in that area to make sure that they can obviously respect their property rights, but also really advance this important project that'll benefit that entire region for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Minister. I want to ask about Water for Life. I think it's important. Large regional water systems, 2 municipalities to assist larger communities in the construction of high priority municipal water supply and treatment. This is important. Clean water is important. And so can you just explain the importance of the Water for Life program in ensuring Albertans continue to enjoy safe, clean, drinkable water for the foreseeable future? And this is under on page 232, line item 6.2.
Yeah, Water for Life obviously is is an important water granting program. In 25-26, it's going to have 257.5 million that'll assist the construction of municipal water supply and treatment and wastewater and disposal. So it's so important, especially in smaller rural communities that obviously don't have the economy of scale that obviously Edmonton and Calgary, some of the larger communities would have. So to be able to make sure that Water for Life is there to help our rural communities grow and expand and maintain their existing water infrastructure, because it may just be a convenience that a lot of us overlook, but to be able to turn on a tap and get fresh water is really a blessing. And so it's something that we want to make sure the Water for Life program is fully funded, and also work with municipalities to be able to make sure that those projects are developed in a timely manner. And I'm looking down at MLA Hominick, we were in Bruderheim not too long ago, announcing a Water for Life project that started and completed and on time within a year or so. And it was incredible to see the people in that community know that their fire hydrants were actually pressurized up so that they could actually use them, and that their insurance would drop the fact that now that there is a fire system that actually has proper pressurized hydrants and also access to fresh water. So it's so important in these communities, and I'm really proud of the work that this project does, for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Minister, and thank you for the staff too as well here tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move over to the opposition side. Member Dack, go ahead, 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity once again. Minister, I have lots of questions left and not a lot of time, so we're going to try to move along. I'll group some questions with the Chair's permission together. They're related, but I'm hoping that the Minister with his staff can provide answers tonight if possible. In the 2025 Provincial Construction Program, and we're talking about page 228 to 31, line 2.1 of the government estimates, Mr. Chair. In the 2025 Provincial Construction Program, how many of the contracts for those projects were sole source contracts, and how many were put out to tender? What criteria does the ministry use to decide whether to issue a sole source contract or to put the project out to tender? And what criteria must be met for a sole source contract? Now, given the current situation, is the ministry considering giving preference to Canadian and Albertan companies in awarding these contracts? Because, of course, the CUSMA accord between Canada and the United States has been significantly breached by the President of the United States. And so I'm wondering if indeed we are now free to give absolute preference to Canadian and Alberta companies in awarding contracts for highway construction program projects. I'll stop there.
So in the provincial construction program, what we typically do when it comes to procurement is obviously we have we put something out for tender, so proponents are invited to submit bids or pricing. Compliance is confirmed by our procurement team and awards it to lowest and best bidder. So that's used in the design, bid, build process or the delivery model, and we like that that process just because it's most clear with industry. Industry appreciates it as well. And when you look at the difference between that and then the request for proposal, that includes a mandatory and desirable provisions which are scored by an evaluation committee, and then that committee evaluates qualifications and experience. Again, that's for both the design, bid, build, consultant services, and design, build, project delivery methods. So there's a multitude of ways in which we can put out these projects, but putting them out for tender and these requests for proposals, working with industry to make sure that we get best value for taxpayers' money is something that we do. And the vast majority of our projects are open and competitive. And we always want to make sure that we're getting best value for money, as I said. But we also, just in the way that road construction works, a lot, if not all, of our projects are with Canadian or Albertan companies or countries that we have trade agreements with, so Europe, for example. So that is something that just the nature of our construction industry and our bids going out for our projects, that's the makeup of who primarily bids on our projects.
Thank you, Minister. And through the chair, could you say to this committee what percentage? You said a lot of them are Canadian companies, but what's the percentage? What's the breakdown of how many of these contracts are given to Canadian/Alberta companies versus foreign companies?
So it depends on projects. You look at a Vinci, for example, which is European. They obviously contract out a lot of subcontracts to smaller Canadian and Alberta companies. The Ellisdons, PCLs, all Canadian. So the vast majority of the major contracts are given to Canadian or European countries, or companies, I should say. And then obviously the subs are much more localized and regionalized from there. So if you're working out in Grand Prairie, you'd have a lot of Grand Prairie-based subcontractors working in projects out there, whether that's dirt moving, gravel, etc. So a lot, like I said, a lot of our projects are, and whether it's road building or maintenance, is done by locals or Canadian or European companies.
Thank you for that. And follow-up as well, Mr. Chair. Given the possibility that alternatives exist, would you consider having your ministry prohibit American companies from competing for highway road construction projects now that we are faced with tariffs that are totally unjustified against our country and a serious economic existential threat to our country from the Americans and the American president and the administration? Would you consider prohibiting American companies from competing for those projects?
So the 25 highway maintenance contracts that we have right now obviously come up for renewal at different times, so they're all in varying stages. But it is something that, again, trying to put the province first, we're looking at how we can make sure that we prioritize Canadian companies going forward for these projects. And I think everybody in this room is hoping to have some normalized relationship, that the USMCA is obviously something that is adhered to by all the countries involved. So hopefully there's more certainty coming to Canada-U.S. relations, but we'll see what happens on April 2nd, and obviously federal government, rightfully so, should retaliate with retaliatory tariffs of any tariffs that are put on Canada. And I think it's on all of us to make sure that we look in our own different unique departments of how we can help be able to put Alberta companies in Alberta, whether job creators, jobs, first, to make sure that we have that we can try to weather the storm and ultimately try to bring peace to these turbulent
Thank
tariff
you for
times.
that. And through the minister, can I interpret your answer, Minister, as a yes, you would potentially consider banning American companies from competing for not only construction projects, but any type of procurement that your ministry may do to ban Americans from being permitted to compete for those contracts and then exclude them from the process?
Well, something, and I said it before, after April 2nd, we're planning on meeting with the construction industry to have essentially this conversation with them of how deep do we want to dig when it comes to straight up procurements, to subcontractors, to equipment, to possibility of specialized equipment that's really hard to get somewhere else. How deep do we want to go into excluding U.S. firms, whether it's through the procurement from actually doing the work to actually getting equipment or parts? So that's something.
The question I'm asking.
I'm telling you the answer, which is we're working with industry to be able to find out what's the most appropriate response after April 2nd.
All right, thank you for that. Let's continue on. And a previous questioner from the government side had asked about airports, and there's a number of questions I have with respect to airports, but I wanted particularly to talk about YEG, Edmonton International Airport, and of course we all know that they have had difficulty over the last number of years in maintaining international flights, direct international flights at YEG. And of course, there have been some good news, and new flights have been added, but traditionally, now the YEG is being seen as the poor cousin to Calgary in terms of being an international hub. And I think we do a disservice to our Alberta economy and to economic corridors that we want to maintain in the province by having the volume of international direct flights diminish at YEG in relation to Calgary. And realize they're not going to be completely equivalent, but is this a concern that the minister has, that the YEG seems to have difficulty maintaining international direct flights, whether it be passenger and cargo? And what indeed discussions has the minister been having with YEG and the Airport Authority to determine ways to stop that leakage and support the maintenance and improvement of international non-stop flights into and out of YEG?
Well, I think the competition is good between Edmonton and Calgary, and I think Edmonton does a lot of good work when it comes to cargo and attracting cargo flights coming in. And when you drive by the airport, you see lots of trucking companies and logistic companies set up. Amazon's not too far away from there as well. It's incredible to see the amount of investments in and around the Edmonton International Airport as kind of that logistics cargo hub. And even one of the main reasons we prioritize the Leduc overpass, being able to give direct access to the Edmonton International Airport to help with the trucking logistics. So there's a tremendous amount of expansion of the Edmonton International Airport. I wouldn't say that Calgary's beating them, but...
Very much, Minister. We'll now move to the government side. Member Yao, go ahead. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair. Mr. Dreeshen, thank you so much, and to your team for all the hard work that you guys are doing, and great work at that. I can honestly say that prior to being a elected representative, I understood ministries like health and education, advanced education, didn't understand the importance of a ministry like transportation. And now that I'm an MLA, that's the number one issue that all my constituents yell at me about, is obviously the permafrost that we get affected up north there, and the state of the roads, but they are getting repaired, and I want to thank you and your team for ensuring that happens in the north. So, key objective 1.3 on page 171 of the ministry business plan speaks to the ministry's plan to collaborate with industry stakeholders, other governments, Indigenous communities to identify advanced nation-building infrastructure projects to increase market access for Alberta businesses. I can certainly see why Premier Smith put you on this file. Besides being charming and charismatic, you're ridiculously smart, and I think you have the ability to really have those good conversations with our counterparts in the other provinces, and even the Americans, as well as our international partners around the world, as we try to sell our products. I don't think you're as good that you can prevent ice from forming on our roads, though. I would like to question how you would change the planet's rotation around the sun or the tilt of the earth, but you know, someone's giving you credit for that, so I'm going to put faith in that you can do all that. That said, again, our government has been doing a lot of things to try to build up those relationships internationally, whether it's Asia. I understand one of our ministers might be going to Europe this year to see if they can demonstrate a business case for things like our natural gas. But the key thing throughout all of this is the economic corridors, a great concept for ensuring that all the regulations and rules and the permitting is all done in a smooth and efficient manner for these corridors. I know you try to work with, again, our surrounding provinces. I wonder if you can explain a little bit more about, first off, the global demand for our resources, and if you can highlight the investments that are being made to improve these transportation infrastructure that facilitates this trade and this market access. And through the chair to the minister, also, if the minister could explain to the committee the process of stakeholder relations and what that looks like for the ministry, and how we're working with these stakeholders to ensure that this business can continue to thrive going forward. And just hoping that you can maybe explain how the movement of goods is essential for Alberta's economic growth. If you can highlight any investments in budget 25 2025 that'll strengthen our supply chain connectivity. Obviously, more important than ever with our biggest trading partner perhaps taking a bit of a different perspective than they usually do in different actions. But I'm wondering if you can just explain the great work that you're doing in regards to these economic corridors and our international partners as well as our interprovincial partners, please.
Great question, and I'm going to have my guys clip that very kind compliment. I appreciate that. And yeah, the ice-free comment from the NDP did strike me odd. We did write it down, so if we can figure out how to make Alberta ice-free and don't have winter, we'll get back to you right away on that. But when it comes to the economic corridor funding, there is $2.6 billion in our 3-year capital plan that is going towards economic corridors and the planning and the development of it. So it is something that we are prioritizing. That's about 75% of that $2.6 billion in the capital plan, I should say, is dedicated for economic corridors. So that is significant. And how we engage with stakeholders is something that I'll actually throw you a compliment back, is really helpful with our MLAs up north, whether it's yourself or Minister Jean, talking to First Nations and talking to people about the importance of economic corridors. Yes, for the economic side of being able to get, whether it's forestry, oil and gas products to market in a safer, faster way, but also to keep communities safe in northern Alberta. And I credit your work of being able to be a champion on Highway 686, the importance of working with the First Nations and kind of the collective idea that we had of, instead of us as the government saying, here we went to engineering company X, we put a line on the map that goes through your area, what do you think about it? Go take this map to your people and consult on it. We flipped that script by being able to talk about the concept of Highway 686 and this new 200-kilometer plus road going from Fort McMurray west, and be able to connect these communities. And that was something that, I think the First Nations appreciated, that they were engaged right at the beginning, not at the end. And now we're close to being able to put that line on the map and have essentially that buy-in by the First Nations, who are actually pushing us to say, okay, let's start this project, let's get building as soon as we can. So to me, it's something that just the engagement and talking to people in these areas is how you know to prioritize it, because you get a better understanding of what's there. And your question of, what does Alberta have and why is it important to have economic corridors? We have the 4th largest natural gas reserves in the world. And oil reserves in the world. It's incredible. And so to be able to get those products to market, and not just north-south, but being able to go east, west, north, is something that it's interesting to see the federal Liberal government, propped up by the NDP, passing things like the Federal Impact Assessment Act, that's essentially dubbed the No More Pipeline Act, that banned a tanker ban going off of the west coast of Alberta Energy. To see those pieces of legislation now looked at in a different lens by that same Liberal NDP government in Ottawa is, maybe it's disingenuous, maybe it's not lasting, but at least it's nice that they're at least seeing the reality of the damage that they've done over the last 10 years of being able to stop big major energy projects across this province. And the last 10 years there's $176 billion worth of energy projects in Canada that have been cancelled. And that hurts Albertans because of the royalties that we're not receiving. That hurts our potential of not being able to have jobs, great mortgage paying jobs here in the province. So obviously, as you're an MLA from the north, you realize that of the $15+ billion of royalties that the Alberta government brings in comes from rural Alberta, and the vast majority comes from northern Alberta. So that's important to be able to develop these economic corridors and to be able to make friends with Saskatchewan and Manitoba, the Northwest Territories, ideally that Magnificent Seven with BC and the 3 territories and the Prairie provinces. That goes a long way. And obviously, we can't forget about the United States. We obviously have hundreds of years of infrastructure built going north-south. There's over $100 billion worth of oil and gas shipped down to the States. Of the 4.4 million barrels that are shipped out of this province every day, the vast majority goes down into the United States. So we have to make sure that relationship is strong. And obviously, not just helps Alberta, but it also helps American jobs and American refineries and America's economy too, to be able to have Alberta oil down there as well. So every direction we have to prioritize, and have in economic corridors and transportation, it does give a really good perspective of how to prioritize these projects, and will continue to do so. But I appreciate that question.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Minister. That said, I guess, I mean, are you able to share with us at all, just, and I know we, as a government, we have to take, or as a government, that you have to take that shotgun approach, if you will, and look at every single option, whether it's British Columbia or provinces to the east of us, or down south. Are you able to share with us any progress in any of these discussions? Even like, you know, I hear there's still inklings of another group that possibly wants to do the route to Alaska. A colleague of mine is actually working in Surrey, Port Alberni areas, and they're looking at trying to see if they can expand their ports to offset the main Vancouver terminals in order to export goods. I know a lot of that might be really preliminary, but are you able to share with us any discussions or positive news in those fronts? Any progress?
Well, we have, with the Port of Prince Rupert, we're working with the Industrial Heartland and CN Rail and the port. It kind of started with BC and Prince Rupert did an economic corridor study. They didn't call it that, but essentially what it was, through the province of BC to Prince Rupert. And so we just tacked it on from the Alberta side to say, well, from the Industrial Heartland to the BC border and obviously out to Prince Rupert, what does that mean for Alberta's economy, and what could it mean if we could expand and get more pipeline access or rail access to Prince Rupert? So,
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll go back to the opposition side. Member Dock, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. To the Minister, a serious question, Minister. I know that the government has commissioned a railway master plan study, and that's underway. And there have been survey put out by the province with the preliminary results, asking Albertans about how they feel about rail projects, whether it be Edmonton-Calgary, the LRT to downtown to both Edmonton and Calgary, Banff-Kananaskis, to Calgary, so forth. But in relation to that, and keeping that as a backdrop, I'm wondering if the minister sees a need for a third lane on a QE2, given the traffic volumes on a QE2 highway, or does he feel that an eventual passenger railway, Edmonton-Calgary, will negate the need for this investment? So what rationale in the studies or studies is the minister using to not invest into expanding the QE2 roadway? Has that been knocked off the rails, or where is the balance in the consideration of QE2? Because the condition of the highway is not great. There's places that are being improved, but it also is high volume, and in places, in times of the day and a week, it's very congested. So I'm sure that the minister has a decision point at which they'll have to come to terms with this. Railway projects, high-speed rail, Edmonton to Calgary, that's a multi-year contemplation. It's a number of years away, and I'm not sure if the capacity of the QE2 will hold up that long. So what say you?
Well, first off, I think you mixed up your metaphors there. But Highway 2, the third lane being added to it is something that in some places it's already there. Some places there's more than 3 lanes going in one direction. So that with traffic volumes, we'll always assess, and we will add as time goes on, eventually to have 3 lanes in one direction, or a total of 6 or more. So that planning and design is already underway to see how and when that would be timed and sequenced out. But the passenger rail master plan will be released this summer, and it again will look at the sequencing of the possibility of passenger rail in the province. And if I was a betting man, I would probably say that the commuter portion of Airdrie down to Calgary would probably be the first sequenced passenger rail project to happen. You had mentioned a high-speed rail between Edmonton and Calgary, or possibility of a Calgary to Banff project. I would think that those would be sequenced somewhat later, just due to the complexity of acquiring that much land, to do the proper negotiations, to be able to design it as well. So that would be my guess of how the passenger rail master plan is going to roll out. And again, just the sequencing of how passenger rail can be used to alleviate vehicle traffic on our roads, because you're obviously having Albertans using rails instead of our roads. But it's not an either or. It's not we're all committed to rail and there's no roads, or vice versa. So we think we can develop and do both, and I would encourage you and all Albertans to read the passenger rail plan when it comes up, because I think it'll be really interesting of how we can sequence these really important passenger rail projects across the province.
Thank you, Minister. In that vein, through the chair, Minister, you've had made comments publicly about sort of the low-hanging fruit of these rail projects that are being considered under the rail master plan, and I believe what you mentioned was it was the downtown to airport routes in both cities. You've already mentioned Calgary being a priority with the Blue Line extension, but have been less vocal about Edmonton's potential for a route from downtown to the airport. And there's a couple of options that have been talked about, whether it be using heavier rail and the CP rail right of way, whether that's even a possibility, or extension of the LRT south to the airport in Edmonton. Now, what contemplation has your ministry got underway, and because that is, I think, one of the pieces that should be dealt with sooner rather than later, and could potentially be something that is not that far off. What studies have been undertaken, what discussions have happened so far to talk about what alignment that you might prefer, because you seem to prefer certain alignments for rail projects. What alignments are you potentially preferring to get some type of a rail from downtown Edmonton to the airport?
Well, I just said that the passenger rail master plan will come out this summer. So again, we'll have to. I encouraged you and everybody to read it when it comes out this fall. So I'd hate to jump the gun before that plan is finalized. But the biggest benefit from that master plan will be the sequencing. So to your point of, well, what about Edmonton being able to go downtown? Is that part of a high-speed rail plan? Is it a commuter rail link? Those are great questions, and the passenger rail master plan will go into that detail of when and how any private sector proponent could build a project that could fill each and any one of those going forward. So that'll be revealed in due time this summer when the plans finally finished and publicly available.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Through the chair, two quick questions on specific projects. Number one, of course, Southwest Henday third lane was completed, and it created a benefit to those motorists using that Southwest Henday. The Southeast Henday is also a choke point, and it's increasingly become a complaint by people who are using the Southeast Henday that it also needs to have the third lane added. Now, where are we with respect to project timelines for an additional third lane on the southeast leg to match what took place in the Southwest Henday?
You said the Southwest Henday created a benefit. I was wondering if you were actually going to say thank you for an Edmonton area MLA having that significant investment, but didn't quite get a thank you, but that's okay. But no, it's obviously very, very important. We saw the southwest part of Edmonton grow faster than anyone had pre-planned. Obviously, the ring road has space to add a third lane in one direction, so 6 in total, all the way around. And we constantly do our impact assessments of being able to see the traffic counts in that area. So I would say whether it's the southeast or any other direction on the Henday, once you get the traffic volumes up to where they're at on the southwest, that's when you'll see that, big major expansions of whether it's a bridge crossing the river or just adding extra lanes on the Henday. But we, the Henday in Edmonton and Stoney in Calgary, those ring roads are obviously very important to us. They're part of the provincial highway network, and we'll continue and invest in Edmonton and Calgary's ring roads because they're important to the province and as well as Edmonton and Calgary.
Thank you, Minister. And through the chair, once again, another very important topic which may take more than 2 minutes to get to, and something I've visited before in estimates with the minister, is the topic of a rural bus transportation network in Alberta. And the minister smiles because he knows this is a pet project of mine, and it is, I think, a very serious one. I spoke this afternoon with the owner of a Cold Shut Parcel and Bus, Sonny Belwaria, who operates bus line in Northern Alberta, which had 11 routes, is down to 6, hanging on by the skin of his teeth, because it's difficult to operate a small bus line to serve those northern communities. But it is a vital part of the economic corridor that is now threatened because of the difficulties of providing such a service. There still, it seems to be no real provincial overarching desire to determine what type of a business model or hybrid business model would work to provide rural bus transportation networks, a serious network of regularly scheduled rural bus transportation throughout the province and across Western Canada in conjunction with other provinces. I know that Minister Alcabra, the transportation minister, preceded a few others, wrote a letter to every one of the provincial counterparts asking them if they'd be interested in having federal participation in supporting rural bus transportation, and he reported to me that the Alberta government never responded. So that's disappointing to me, but I'm very interested in making sure that this government is doing something to provide support to find out how rural Alberta can get back a bus transportation network that's going to help rural economic development, going to be public safety, and you can get to the answer in the next block when we return to the question.
Okay, 1-0, there we go. Okay, we go over to the government side, and Member Boychenko, you have 10 minutes, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chair. I would like to talk a little bit about provincial highway maintenance. As I'm MLA for the rural constituency, as well as in my role of parliamentary secretary to Indigenous Relations, I travel across Alberta quite a bit, and member opposite, a good friend of mine that I got a privilege of working together for many years, mentioned that it's important to have a good maintenance program for our highways to keep them safe and keep them up to date and repaired. So next couple of questions here will be specifically to that highway maintenance, if I may. On page 173 of the Ministry Business Plan, Outcome 3, under Initiative Supporting Key Objectives, we can see that the Ministry is allocating $454.4 million in budget 25-26 for provincial highway maintenance to ensure highway pavements and key highway infrastructure is maintained using cost-effective approaches. Highway maintenance is incredibly important for Albertans, and I wanted to applaud the ministry for their work on this front, specifically when it comes to cost-effective approaches. So my question would be to the minister, through the chair if I can. I've noticed that objective specifically mentions cost-effective approaches to highway maintenance. Could the minister explain on these cost-effective measures and explain how these measures will cost effective and still remain reliable for people and keep our highways safe? One example that I personally experienced and I've shared with the minister was just a simple little item, and maybe it's not what it means here, if you can expand on that, but it was when initially the snow was pushed against the media of the highway, and then would freeze and on thaw and run on the side, so kept our highways unsafe. And I mentioned to the minister, and they looked into it, and they're ensuring me they're going to fix that, which is, I think, is very cost effective. But if you can maybe shine a little bit of light, what kind of measures you guys be using? And the second question to that would be, again, to the minister through the chair. I want to speak a little bit more to the allocation of the specifically $454 million towards highway infrastructure maintenance. Could the minister please explain how they decided on this figure and expand on which highways projects will be priority again into 25-26 budget years? So if we can share a little bit on the cost effectiveness, and then on specifically $454 million allocation.
Sure, thank you. And when we look at cost effectiveness, we obviously have our 25 highway contractors, or contracts, maintenance regions, and obviously highway maintenance contractors doing the work in those regions. And when we look at things like salt versus sand, obviously when you're salting the roads, once it's below -12, it really loses its effectiveness as an agent to be able to make the roads obviously less icy, and that's where you have sand and the grip of sand that'll last that much longer in extreme cold or anything colder than -12. So here's an example of cost effectiveness to make sure that we're not having the more costly use of whether it's salt versus sand on a road that really isn't going to have any effectiveness, because it has that, if the weather forecast stipulates, and it's on a case-by-case basis. So that's something that in our highway maintenance contracts we always want to make sure is there. So we are getting the best value for our highway maintenance across the province. And I'd say, overall, the highway maintenance is gone up in this budget, and it's something that we, as I said before, we have more and more Albertans driving on our roads, so to be able to keep our highway maintenance and as well as our road network built up is obviously important. We obviously have a difference in summer maintenance versus winter maintenance. Both are equally important, but if you had to prioritize one, winter maintenance and plowing is obviously extremely important. But even summertime maintenance as well, whether it's pothole filling or mowing of ditches as well, is a safety issue, for whether it's for deer or moose being able to jump out of the ditch and you can't see them because the grass is too tall. That type of maintenance in the summer is very important as well. So we want to make sure that, and a lot of it is complaint based. It's something that we hear as a department of certain areas not being in a perfect state, because again, to monitor all 64,000 lane kilometers is extremely difficult. So we do rely on Albertans to be able to reach out to the department to say that there's an issue. And I know some MLAs have done that as well, which is great, because we just pick up the phone and talk to the highway maintenance contractor in that region and tell them that they need to go do better and get out there. And I'm looking at one down at the end with Jackie. So it's important. And but that's how we look at the cost effectiveness, and as well as trying to make sure that that our roads are as safe as possible on the highway maintenance side. And again, there's more funding for it in this budget.
Good. Thank you, Minister. Good to know that it's been looked at and getting back into the good condition so that it's safe to drive for all of us. If I may maybe shift a little bit into my role as a parliamentary secretary when it comes to First Nations in Alberta and the water tie-in programs that you guys have. On the page 232 of the government estimate, line item 6.3, I can see that the First Nations water tie-in program will be receiving about $5.46 million in additional funding over the next reporting period. When compared to the 24-25 period. This increasable program provides First Nations communities with reliable access to the safe drinking water. in order to reduce or eliminate boil water advisories and to provide reliable wastewater management system. This is a very important question for me as a parliamentary secretary, and it's also nice to see that with your ministry, we always see increases in everything we do. Road maintenance, Green Line, First Nations, it's nice when the government kind of steps it up a little bit. So to the minister, through the chair, this funding will go on to the improve of the conditions of the First Nations peoples across our province who need a reliable wastewater system. And can the minister please explain on this committee how this $5.46 million allocation was determined going on to the 25-26 reporting period, and what will it do for the First Nations that increase?
Great question, and the First Nations Regional Drinking Water Tie-in Program is another wonderful water program that we have in the department, and there's 48 First Nations in Alberta, and 7 of them are currently connected to regional systems, and 14 of those First Nations have been approved for funding, and just to kind of highlight some of them, the Paul First Nation water line to Wabamun, that was a $9 million project. The Alexis Nakota Sioux First Nations, $9.3 million. Cold Lake First Nation, $3.2 million. Whitefish or Goodfish First Nation water line connecting to the Highway 2863 Regional Water Service Commission. That's a $25 million project. The Duneta First Nation, $2.2 million. The Masquachese, $38.9 million. And the Alexander First Nation got another additional funding as well for on their commission side. So there's lots of successful stories of the First Nation water tie-in program, and essentially why that's important, even though we wish we got more funding from the federal government to help in this regard. We want to make sure that if we can bring in these water lines to the First Nations, and then obviously work with them to advocate for federal funding as well to kind of get that final mile in, is obviously very important, and that's something we'll continue to advocate for, because whether you're an Alberta First Nation or an Albertan, we want to make sure that that you know that it's important to be able to get this type of funding and these projects approved, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you very much. It means a lot.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. We'll now go back over to the opposition side. Member Dack,
Very much, Mr. Chair. Pleased to continue on. And then the Minister just mentioned, Mr. Chair, that he would like to see more money from the federal government so he could do more with the water tie-in program. And that's a different tune from what the Minister and his government has been saying to a lot of federal government money that's been offered, because so many billions of dollars been left on the table, it makes a person's head spin. So it may be nice to hear a little bit of a different tune being sung by the Minister when it comes to federal government money that could be put to good use in Alberta project, particularly the Indigenous Water Tie-in Program. I wanted to ask through the chair to the Minister about the $17 billion rural municipal infrastructure deficit that the RMA says exists. They indicate in their commentary about the budget that Budget 2025 is a missed opportunity to grow rural Alberta and increases the pressure that rural municipalities face to meet an ever-expanding list of responsibilities. Why indeed, through the chair, Minister, do we have a $17 billion rural municipal infrastructure deficit, and how are you addressing it? What's your plan?
Well, first off, you talked about federal funding, and the National Trade Corridor funding is a federal program that we as the province of Alberta have put 9 projects in that we haven't heard back from the federal government, or we have got a $0 from. So I know it's he had made, the member made a quip about us not getting enough federal funding. I would like to remind the member that it is his NDP party in Ottawa that is propping up the current Liberal Party that's been in power for 10 years. So the lack of federal funding really doesn't have to look very far to see who would be responsible for that. But we will continue to obviously advocate for Alberta's fair share of funding, whether it's through National Trade Corridor funding or other federal programs going forward. But I do find it interesting, though, that on the Indigenous Water Tie-in Program, he would try to score political points on that, which is kind of surprising to me. It is a very important project for First Nations and for this government. It's something that we'll obviously continue to do. So I don't know if he wants to walk back those comments or not, but I wouldn't play politics on that front.
Thank you, and through the chair to the minister. Minister mentioned earlier that the slow down, move over regulations that were in place were something that he thought was successful. That's not what I'm hearing from the members of the Alberta Tow Truck Drivers Association and Alberta Provincial Fire Chiefs Association are continue to be opposed to this slow down, move over as it is currently regulated in the province, whereby only one lane adjacent to the pulled over emergency or highway maintenance vehicle is required to slow down and move over, yet.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if perhaps Member Dack can tie this to the budget that we're discussing at hand. This is under 23B, speaks to matters other than question under discussion, motion or amendment. Question under discussion. If you could just talk about the budget and refer to the budget, that would be great.
Sure. Would refer to government estimates, page 231, item 3.2, driver safety initiatives that would be covering this particular topic, Mr. Chair. And I think because also the minister has also brought it up, it's in scope today. And I think most tow truck drivers and emergency responders still disagree with the minister that only one lane should slow down and move over. So I'm asking the minister to please provide statistics which show an improvement in safety to those workers, those first responders who are working on the highways. Provide data to show that slow down, move over, and only the first lane adjacent to those pulled over emergency workers with their flashers going has resulted in an improvement in safety to them as workers on the highway.
Just to the point of order, the regulation that he's referencing was passed last year and obviously isn't part of Budget 25. But when it comes to the safety of roadside workers, if I could, Chair, maybe go off of estimates here for a second. The Slow Down, Move Over campaign is obviously very important to make sure that all roadside workers, whether they be police, ambulance, roadside maintenance workers, tow truck drivers, that they all be treated the same and have the exact same rules and regulations. And that was something that from all of those associations, they all felt that all of their lives were equally important, and to have the same set of rules when it comes to a roadside worker, they should be the same. And we brought in the adoption of the blue light campaign as well. And I'm sure everybody's seen blue and amber lights, not just blue and red lights. But they've seen, we've heard from the industry that they've seen a lot of improvements of people slowing down with just even the different color of lights as well. But the slow down and move over of having 60 kilometers beside any roadside worker versus a much higher unsafe speed has gone a long way of improving roadside, not just accidents, but also near misses as well, that we've heard, especially from the tow truck industry as well. So I think a combination of the Slow Down, Move Over campaign and the Blue Light campaign that was made last year has moved the needle when it comes to roadside safety for the workers that really put their lives on the line to make sure that we all are that much safer on Alberta highways.
Thank you, Minister. And through the chair, once again, let's move over to drivers training, Class 1 drivers training, commercial drivers training. Drivers taking Class 1 road test now have the option to do so in an automatic transmission truck. And then drivers are saying to me that this has actually created a two-tier Class 1 license. Will drivers who opt to take the road test in an automatic transmission truck and obtain their Class 1 be legally able to operate a manual transmission truck? And if so, what study gives the minister reassurance that this will be a safe practice? That's one question. And then secondly, what percentage of the driver trainees who receive funding Under the Driving Back to Work program, we're actually working as Class 1 commercial drivers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years after receiving their Class 1 license under the program. That's a follow-up from 2024, and the reference is a business plan, page 172, Mr. Chair, 1B, performance measures, percentage of commercial truck driver job vacancies, because many of these truck driving jobs are vacant. Lots of people going through the program, but they're not working as truck drivers.
So, on the last question on job vacancies, how we're tweaking the grants going forward in budget 25 is to try to address that we're not just training up someone to get a license and then obviously not using that license in the workforce, where there's about 4,500 Class 1 truck drivers short. So we want to make sure that if we are going out and training more Class 1 drivers, that they're actually out in the trucking world and actually getting employed through the industry. So the tweaks that we made to the grants going forward, we hope will connect, not just train up a Class 1 driver, but also connect them into the industry to actually use that Class 1 license for a job. And when it comes to the manual versus automatic, we have seen obviously just a shift in technology of having more automatic trucks being used.
No pun intended.
Sorry?
I said no pun intended. I shift.
I make a lot of bad puns, but I even missed that one. I apologize. But yeah, we have just seen that if you're going to be in a vehicle that is going to be automatic for your entire trucking career, and that is your truck, to be able to know how to operate that truck is obviously important, and then obviously vice versa. So that's something that we've just seen I got an R&D question earlier tonight about how to make sure that we can stay up with the times and to be able to have that provision there. I think goes a long way of training individuals on a truck that they're actually going to be driving, so they know how to drive it on our roads and keep everybody safe. And sorry, and two, if you're licensed, if you have an automatic license, then obviously, and you cannot drive a manual, then that's obviously that's there, obviously.
So you're prohibited from driving manually if you have only licensed automatic?
Correct. If you're licensed to drive that kind of truck, then you can drive it. If you're not, then no.
All right, sounds good. Final follow-up, if you can quickly answer this. Why was the commercial driver grants cut in this budget? That's government estimates 3.3, page 231. Commercial driver grants cut in this budget.
Just how the provision rolling in from previous years. So when we looked at how we could tweak the program, we wanted to make sure that there's two new granting streams, like I mentioned before, the 10 million and the 13 million. So being able to prioritize those two different grant streams.
Thank you very much, Minister. We go to the government side. You have 6.5 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Chair, through you to the Minister. Minister, key objective 1.1 on page 171 of the business plan states that the ministry wants to advance economic corridor investments and expand and improve major highways and roadways across Alberta. I wanted to note that the ministry has promised $8.5 billion over 3 years to build and maintain provincial and municipal infrastructure across the province to the benefit of all Albertans. Minister, to you through the chair, can you please explain how this program is implemented through a fair and transparent procurement process going into 2025, 2026?
Well, I appreciate the work that our procurement shop does when it comes to obviously the fairness of these projects coming out, and obviously the priority is set by us, by government, or I guess on this side, to make sure that we know that these important, whether capital projects or capital maintenance projects, that they are being prioritized when they need to be. We have simple, easy metrics of a road roughness test where we'll actually have individuals drive out and actually monitor the roughness of the roads, so to be able to know where there's bad patches and where there's good patches. So obviously that moves the needle on where we need to prioritize capital maintenance and renewal. But then when it comes to projects, we have other metrics of highway would need to be twinned if it hits at 10,000 cars per day. But then down in Highway 3, maybe you're not gonna hit that 10,000 car mark, but the twinning of it makes sense due to the agriculture industry down there and the truck traffic that obviously interacts with regular traffic on a two-lane highway. So it's interesting to see how we do have standards and metrics, but obviously there's bigger, broader decisions that need to be made or criteria that needs to be made. So we're not just beholden to certain standards, that we have to make sure that it's looked at it through a broader lens. So that all kind of goes into the art of making the priorities in a way that obviously benefits not just Alberta's economy and jobs, but also to keep communities safe. So it's a bit of an art form versus a science.
Thank you, Minister. Chair, through you to the Minister. In the estimates document under line 5.5, page 231, I can see Calgary will be getting about $100 million for LRT projects. Given that expanding the LRT network is a vital aspect of downtown revitalization, and given that budget 2025 maintains this government's funding commitment to Calgary's LRT project, Minister, can you outline what LRT improvements to Calgary that Calgary residents can expect to see? And Minister, can you please explain what these improvements mean for a Calgarians' daily commute?
Great question, and again, this budget has a pay-as-you-go provision when it comes to LRTs in Edmonton and Calgary. So obviously, it incentivizes both cities to get as much construction done as possible, because they'll obviously get the funding for that, versus just a regulated rate of funding going out, whether they do the construction or not. So the pay-as-you-go provision, I do think, will help incentivize these projects to be done sooner, and then obviously have less risk of cost overruns, because there is that financial incentive that's set. But when it comes to Calgary, the Green Line finally getting built is after a decade of delay by, caused by Nenshi when he was the mayor of Calgary and started this project. Then 2 years after that, start by Nenshi when he was still mayor, the NDP cut it in half. They cut the whole north section of the Green Line off, 23 kilometers of it. And again, Nenshi was still mayor. And now this weird alliance of Nenshi and the NDP joining forces again now is kind of just poetically strange. But the Green Line, we're finally getting it built. This government's finally getting it built with this current city council in Calgary, which is great to finally see, and Calgarians will finally see major construction on the Green Line going forward, finally, after that decade of delay. And the Blue Line as well. The construction is being built on that to get it up to 88th on the northeast side of Calgary, and engineering work to get to tie into the Calgary International Airport is going to be huge for Calgary. But that engineering and construction will obviously take more time than the 88th Ave work on the Blue Line. So those are two big LRT projects that are going to see very significant construction in this year and in the following years in Calgary.
Thank you, Minister. And Chair, through you to the Minister. Under Ministry Business Plans Outcome 1.1 on page 171, it is evident that investments in transportation infrastructure are critically important to maintain the significant growth we are seeing in the city of Calgary and the surrounding area. Chair, through you to the Minister, could you please outline what capital funding is being made over the next 3 years to bolster the transportation network for Calgary and the surrounding area? And with regards to the city of Calgary and the revitalization of the downtown core, what is included in budget 2025 to specifically support downtown Calgary?
Well, for when it comes to the Calgary Ring Road, obviously the completion of that was last year, a $4 billion project, which was significant. We see the Deerfoot that last year the north section near the airport was completed. The middle chunk, as I like to call it, of the Deerfoot will be done this year. This is Aecon's work, as well as the south portion of it with a new bridge and about a $600 million project of widening out the Deerfoot as well on the south side has been significant. You mentioned the downtown revitalization project of the new Calgary Rivers Event Center. Construction is well underway of that from transportation to be able to do the infrastructure around the new Saddle Dome.
I apologize for the interruption, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry's estimates has concluded. I'd like to remind the committee members that we are scheduled to meet tomorrow, March 18th, 2025 at 9 a.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Forestry and Parks. Thank you, everyone, and the meeting's adjourned. Well done, everybody.